The sound of the electric clippers buzzing in the bathroom that morning will haunt me until they put me in the ground. I opened the door expecting to see my son getting a trim before he walked down the aisle. Instead, I saw my wife Ruby frozen in the chair, her eyes wide with a terror I had not seen in 40 years of marriage. A massive patch of her beautiful silver hair, the crown she had grown with such pride, was gone, shaved down to the scalp. Standing over her was my daughter-in-law Tiffany, still in her silk bridal robe, holding the clippers in one hand and her phone in the other. She was not apologizing. She was not helping. She was laughing into the camera lens and shouting about a prank gone wrong while the live stream comments rolled in. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned white, waiting for the nightmare to end. But the nightmare was just beginning. Before I tell you how I made that girl regret the day she was born, let me know in the comments if you have ever had to protect someone you love from their own family. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe respect is non-negotiable. My name is Caleb Johnson. I am 72 years old, and I have spent my life building things. I built a logistics empire from a single delivery truck in Atlanta. I built a fortune that I keep quiet because I value peace over attention. But most importantly, I built a life with Ruby. She is the spine of this family, the woman who held me up when the world tried to beat me down. Her hair was her glory. It was a thick mane of silver and white that she tended to like a garden. She wore it high and proud, a symbol of the grace and wisdom she had earned over 7 decades. That Saturday morning, the house was vibrating with the chaotic energy of the wedding day. My son Jamal was marrying Tiffany, a girl he had met 6 months ago. I had my reservations about her. She was 26 years old, loud, and lived her entire life through the screen of her smartphone. She called herself an influencer, though I never quite understood who she was influencing or to do what. To me, she seemed hollow, a pretty shell with nothing inside but an appetite for attention. But Jamal was 32 and desperate to be loved, so I kept my mouth shut. I paid for the venue. I paid for the catering. I paid for the flowers. I thought I was buying my son's happiness. I did not know I was financing my wife's humiliation. I was in the master bedroom tying my tie when I heard it. It was a sound that did not belong on a wedding morning. It was a sharp intake of breath, followed by a low guttural sob that sounded like an animal in a trap. It came from the guest bathroom down the hall, the one Tiffany had commandeered for her bridal preparation. I dropped my tie. I moved faster than my old knees usually allow down the hallway. The door was locked, but not well. I didn't knock. I didn't ask if everyone was decent. I kicked the door right below the handle and it swung open, banging hard against the tile wall. The smell of burnt hair and expensive perfume hit me first. Then the ring light blinded me for a second. When my eyes adjusted, my heart stopped in my chest. Ruby was sitting on a low stool facing the vanity mirror. Her hands were gripping the edges of the seat so hard her veins were popping out. She was staring at her reflection, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, ruining the makeup she had just had done. And there it was, a jagged, ugly strip of bare skin running from her forehead to the middle of her skull. It looked violent. It looked like an assault. Tiffany was standing behind her. She didn't even look at me when I burst in. Her eyes were glued to the screen of her phone, which was mounted on a tripod. She was holding the clippers up to the camera lens, posing with a feigned look of shock. "Oh my God, you guys!" she shrieked, her voice pitching up an octave for her audience. "I literally just slipped. I was trying to give her a little edge up, you know, like a cool fade, and my hand just slipped. Look at her. She looks like one of those rappers, right? Drop a fire emoji if you think Mama Ruby looks lit." The clippers were still buzzing in her hand. That sound, that angry mechanical hornet sound. I stepped into the room. The air felt thick and heavy. "Get away from her," I said. My voice was low. It was the voice I used to use in boardrooms when I was about to hostilely take over a competitor. It was a voice that made grown men nervous. Tiffany finally looked at me. She rolled her eyes and let out a dramatic sigh. "Caleb, chill out. We are live right now. Say hi to the fam." She turned the phone toward me, thrusting the camera in my face. I slapped the phone out of her hand. I didn't mean to, or maybe I did. I just reacted. The device clattered across the tiled floor, skidding under the sink. "Hey," Tiffany yelled, her face contorting from performance to genuine anger. "Are you crazy? That is the new iPhone. Jamal is going to hear about this." I ignored her. I knelt down beside Ruby. My beautiful Ruby. She was shaking. Her whole body was vibrating with shame. She wouldn't look at me. She just kept staring at the mirror at the violation on her head. "Ruby, baby, look at me," I whispered. I reached out to touch her shoulder, but she flinched. "I look like a monster," she choked out. Her voice was so small, so broken, it tore me apart. "How can I walk down the aisle like this, Caleb? Everyone will stare. Everyone will laugh." I stood up. The rage in my gut was hot and rising fast like bile. I turned to Tiffany, who was on her hands and knees retrieving her phone. She checked the screen and let out a sigh of relief. "It is cracked," she spat, standing up and brushing off her silk robe. "You owe me $1,500, Caleb. And honestly, you are overreacting. It is just hair. It grows back. Besides, the views on this are going to be insane. We already have 10,000 people watching. This is viral gold. Do you know how much engagement this will get? This pays for the honeymoon." She was talking about engagement. She was talking about views. She had just assaulted my wife, and she was talking about a honeymoon. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "This is my dressing room. I am the bride. You get out and take her with you. I need to fix my lighting before I go back live to explain why my father-in-law is violent." I took a step toward her. "I have never hit a woman in my life. My father raised me better than that." But in that moment, I wanted to hurt her. I wanted to wipe that smirk off her face. I wanted to make her feel the humiliation she had just inflicted on the woman I worshipped. "Caleb, no." Ruby's voice stopped me. She had stood up. She picked up a towel and draped it over her head, covering the damage. She walked over and placed a hand on my chest. Her hand was cold. "Don't," she said. "Please don't. Today is Jamal's day. If you cause a scene, if we cancel the wedding, he will never forgive us. You know how much he loves her. You know how much he wants this. He loves a snake, Ruby," I said, my voice trembling. "Look what she did to you." "It was an accident," Ruby lied. She looked me in the eye and lied to protect our son's happiness. "She said it was an accident, Caleb. She was trying to help." Tiffany snorted behind us. "Yeah, exactly. Just a prank that went a little left." "God, you old people are so sensitive. Can you leave now? I need to get ready." I looked at Tiffany. Really looked at her. I saw the emptiness in her eyes. I saw the cruelty disguised as charisma, and I saw my son's future crumbling before it had even begun. I put my arm around Ruby. I could feel her weight leaning into me. She was holding herself together by a thread. "We are leaving," I said to Tiffany. "But you listen to me, girl. You better pray that hair grows back by the time you say I do. Because if you ever touch her again, if you ever point that camera at her without permission, I will not be responsible for what happens." Tiffany just waved her hand dismissively, turning back to her ring light. She picked up the clippers again, blowing the loose silver hair from the blades. Whatever, she muttered. "Make sure you fix her up before the ceremony. I don't want her looking like a chemo patient in my wedding photos. It ruins the aesthetic." I led Ruby out of the bathroom. The hallway was empty. The joyful noise of the house felt miles away. I took her into our bedroom and locked the door. I sat her down on the edge of the bed and went to the closet. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a box we hadn't touched in years. Inside was a high-quality wig Ruby had bought years ago when she thought she might need chemotherapy for a scare that turned out to be nothing. She had never worn it. It was a dark brown bob, completely different from her natural silver crown. I brought it to her. I didn't say a word. I just brushed the remaining silver hair back gently, kissing her forehead right next to the shaved patch. I helped her put the wig on. It didn't look like her. It looked like a disguise. It looked like hiding. She looked in the mirror and tried to smile for me. "It is okay, Caleb," she whispered. "It is just for today. We will get through today for Jamal." I nodded, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I would have roared. I realized then that Ruby was right. We would get through today. But tomorrow was a different story. As we walked out of the bedroom, Ruby clinging to my arm with her head lowered, I checked my own phone. A notification popped up. Someone had sent me a link. It was Tiffany's live stream. The video was titled, "Prank Gone Wrong, Mother-in-Law Rage." I clicked it. The video showed Tiffany winking at the camera after we had left the room. "Don't worry, fam," she said to her followers. "That was just the warm-up. Part 2 is going to be even more shocking. Stay tuned and remember to subscribe." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. My hand brushed against the cool metal of my money clip. They thought I was just an old man living off a pension. They thought I was powerless. They thought they could shave my wife's dignity away for clicks and likes. I took Ruby's hand and squeezed it. "Let's go to the wedding, my love," I said softly. But in my head, I was already making a list, and Tiffany's name was right at the top, written in red. She wanted a show. She wanted views. I decided right then and there that I would give her the greatest show of her life, but she wasn't going to like the ending. The organ music started a low vibration that I could feel in the soles of my feet. It was supposed to be a joyful sound, a prelude to the union of two souls. But to me, it sounded like a funeral march. I sat in the front row of the cathedral, a place that smelled of incense and ancient wood, holding Ruby's hand so tight I was afraid I might crush her fingers. She was staring straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the altar, but I knew she wasn't seeing the flowers or the candles. She was thinking about what was hiding under that dark synthetic wig. The wig was the wrong color. In the chaos of the bedroom, we hadn't noticed that it was a shade too dark, a stark contrast to her skin tone that usually glowed against her natural silver hair. And it was crooked, just slightly, just enough to be noticeable to anyone who truly knew her. The edge of the lace was lifting near her left temple, a small gap that betrayed the disguise. Every few seconds, Ruby would reach up with a trembling hand to adjust it to pull it down, but then she would stop, terrified of drawing attention to herself. I looked around the church. It was packed. Jamal and Tiffany had invited 300 people. Half of them were family and old friends, people who had known Ruby for decades. The other half were strangers, people Tiffany called her community influencers, content creators, and hangers-on who held their phones up like lighters at a concert. They were live streaming the entrance, broadcasting our family moment to thousands of invisible spectators. Then the doors opened. A collective gasp went through the room. I have to admit, she looked stunning. Tiffany was wearing a dress that must have cost more than my first 3 cars combined. It was a mermaid cut covered in crystals that caught the light with every step she took. She glided down the aisle, a vision of perfection, her makeup flawless, her smile radiant. "Oh, she is an angel," I heard my cousin Sarah whisper behind me. "Just look at her, Caleb. Jamal is a lucky man, an angel. If they only knew. If they could see the demon that lived behind those perfectly lashed eyes." Jamal was standing at the altar waiting for her. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, standing tall and proud. My heart ached looking at him. I remembered holding him when he was hours old, promising to protect him from the world. I never thought I would have to protect him from the woman walking toward him. As Tiffany reached the altar, she paused for dramatic effect, letting the cameras get the perfect shot. She handed her bouquet to her maid of honor and turned to face Jamal. Then she turned slightly toward the congregation, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. Her eyes scanned the front row. They landed on us. They landed on Ruby. For a split second, her smile faltered, not with guilt, but with critical assessment. She saw the wig. She saw the crooked lace. And I saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward in a micro-expression of satisfaction. She liked seeing Ruby like this. She enjoyed the reduction of a queen to a scared, hiding woman. I looked at Jamal. He was looking at his bride with pure adoration. Then his gaze drifted down to us. He looked at his mother. He saw the wig. He saw the distress in her posture. He saw the way she was shrinking into herself. "Do something," I begged him silently. "Go to her, hug her, fix her wig, show her that she is still the most important woman in your life." But he didn't. He looked at the wig, saw that it was askew, and then looked back at Tiffany. He noticed that the long train of her dress was bunched up on the floor, ruining the perfect circle it was supposed to form. Without hesitation, he stepped down, bent over, and carefully arranged the fabric, smoothing it out so his wife would look perfect for the cameras. He stepped over his mother's dignity to fix his wife's vanity. That was the moment something broke inside me. It wasn't a loud break. It was quiet, like a tree branch snapping under the weight of too much snow. I realized then that my son was gone. The boy I raised was buried somewhere deep inside that tuxedo, suffocated by his need to please this woman. The ceremony proceeded. The priest spoke about love being patient and kind. He spoke about mutual respect and sacrifice. Every word felt like a lie. I watched Tiffany nod solemnly, wiping away a fake tear at the perfect moment while Ruby sat beside me, scarcely breathing, terrified to move her head too much in case the wig slipped further. Then came the rings. Jamal said his vows, promising to love and cherish her. His voice wavered with emotion. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to tell him that love doesn't hold a pair of clippers to an old woman's head. But I stayed seated. I stayed silent. Because that is what men of my generation do. We endure. We hold the line. It was Tiffany's turn. She took the ring Jamal offered. But before she slid it onto his finger, she leaned in to hug him, a spontaneous gesture of affection for the audience. As she pulled back, she leaned over the altar rail just inches from my face. It looked like she was sharing a sweet moment with her new father-in-law. She smiled that sweet saccharine smile, but her whisper was like ice water in my ear. "Don't look so glum, old man," she hissed through her teeth. "You are on camera. Smile or I will tell everyone you are ruining my vibe." She pulled back, instantly beaming at the photographer who snapped the picture. To the world, it looked like a tender family moment. To me, it was a declaration of war. She wasn't just cruel, she was calculating. She knew exactly where the cameras were. She knew how to manipulate the narrative in real time. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I didn't smile, but I stopped scowling. I did it for Ruby. I did it because if I caused a scene now, Tiffany would play the victim and Ruby would be the villain who ruined the wedding. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and sat back. That was when I felt the vibration against my thigh, my phone. I never keep my phone on during church, but today was different. Today I was waiting for ammunition. I waited until everyone stood up for the pronouncement of husband and wife. In the commotion of applause and cheering, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out the device. I held it low, shielding the screen with my body. It was a text message from Arthur, my personal lawyer, and the only man in Atlanta who knew the true extent of my assets. The message was short, simple, and devastating. Investigation complete. Subject has 5 maxed-out credit cards. Total debt $214,000. Bank is threatening to sue. She is drowning Caleb. I stared at the numbers. $200,000. This girl, this arrogant, cruel girl who was currently walking down the aisle, waving like a princess, was financially underwater. She wasn't rich. She wasn't successful. She was a fraud living on borrowed money and desperate for a lifeline. A slow, cold realization spread through me. She didn't marry Jamal for love. She married him because she thought we had money. Or maybe she married him to use his credit score. But more importantly, she was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people are reckless. The live stream in the bathroom, the obsession with views, the constant need for engagement, it all made sense now. She wasn't just vain, she was monetizing us. We were not her family, we were her content. And content equals cash. I looked up as the happy couple exited the church. Tiffany was laughing, throwing her head back, the diamonds on her neck flashing. She looked like she had won the lottery, and in her mind she probably thought she had. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. My hand brushed against the cool metal of the device, and I felt a surge of power. I had leverage now. I knew her secret, and unlike her, I knew how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. We moved to the reception hall. It was a grand ballroom in downtown Atlanta, decorated with thousands of white roses. It smelled of money. Money that I had paid. Money that should have gone to my retirement or to a grandchild's college fund, but instead had been poured into this charade. We were seated at the head table. Ruby refused to take off her coat, even though it was warm inside. She kept her head down, picking at her salad. I tried to get her to eat, to drink a little water, but she just shook her head. "I just want to go home, Caleb," she whispered. "Please take me home." "Soon, baby," I promised. "Soon." The DJ started playing upbeat music. The guests were mingling, drinking champagne, laughing. The atmosphere was electric. But then I noticed a shift. It started at a table near the back. A group of young women, Tiffany's friends, were looking at their phones. Then they looked at the head table. Then they looked at each other and started whispering. The ripple effect was immediate. It spread from table to table like a contagion. People would check their phones, their eyes would widen, and they would look up at us, specifically at Ruby. I saw my cousin Sarah pull out her reading glasses and squint at her screen. Then she covered her mouth with her hand and looked at me with horror. "What is happening?" Ruby asked, sensing the change in the room. "Why are they looking at us?" I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to search for it. My notifications were blowing up. Tiffany Style just uploaded a new video. "Watch now, pranking my mother-in-law on my wedding day." I clicked the link. The video started playing. It wasn't the raw footage I had seen earlier. It was edited. It had music. It had sound effects. It started with Tiffany holding the clippers to the camera, putting a finger to her lips. "Shh, watch this," she whispered. Then it cut to Ruby sitting in the chair. Tiffany approached her from behind. The sound of the clippers was amplified. Then the swipe, the gasp, the look of absolute devastation on Ruby's face. But Tiffany had edited it to make it look funny. She had added a laugh track when Ruby started crying. She had added a clown horn sound effect when I burst into the room. She had put a filter over Ruby's face to make her look distorted and ridiculous. The caption read, "She wanted a makeover, so I gave her one. LOL, love you, Mom." I looked at the view count. It had been up for 10 minutes. It already had 50,000 views. The comments were scrolling so fast I couldn't read them. Some were laughing, some were shocked, but they were watching. They were all watching. I looked up. Tiffany was at the center of the dance floor holding a glass of champagne. She was checking her phone. She saw the numbers. She saw the engagement. And she smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. A smile of pure, unadulterated greed. She looked over at our table. She raised her glass to me. A silent toast. She had done it. She had humiliated us to the world, and she was getting rich off of it. Jamal was standing next to her. He was looking at his phone too. I saw his face go pale. He read the comments. He saw what his wife had done. For a second, I thought he would react. I thought he would finally be the man I raised. But then Tiffany grabbed his arm. She whispered something in his ear. She pointed at the phone screen, probably showing him the dollar signs, the potential earnings. Jamal hesitated. He looked at us. He looked at his mother shrinking in her seat. Then he looked back at the phone, and he nodded. He let Tiffany pull him onto the dance floor. He chose the views. He chose the money. I put my hand over Ruby's trembling hand. She hadn't seen the video yet, and I wasn't going to show her. Not here, not now. "Let's go," I said, standing up. "We are leaving now," Caleb Ruby asked, hope flooding her voice. "Yes," I said, "we are leaving. But we are not running away. We are going to prepare for war." I helped my wife up. We walked out of the ballroom, past the staring guests, past the whispers, past the pitying looks. I held my head high. I stared down anyone who dared to make eye contact. As we reached the heavy double doors, I turned back one last time. Tiffany was spinning on the dance floor, her dress creating a whirlwind of light. She thought she was the star of the show. She thought this was her moment. She didn't know that she had just handed me the weapon that would destroy her. She thought debt was her only problem. She was about to find out that a debt to the bank is nothing compared to a debt to a father who has been pushed too far. The video was viral. Good. That meant the world was watching, and I wanted them to have front row seats for what was coming next. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Ruby breathing beside me. She was asleep, but it was a restless, fitful sleep. Every few minutes she would whimper or reach up to touch her head, only to find the silk scarf she had tied tight around her skull before getting into bed. The wig was on the dresser, staring at me like a severed head. The house was quiet, but outside in the digital world a storm was raging. I got up at 5 in the morning. I made coffee strong and black and sat at the kitchen table with my iPad. I did not want to look, but I had to know what we were up against. I opened the app. The numbers made me nauseous. 5 million views. In less than 24 hours, 5 million people had watched my wife be assaulted and humiliated. The comments were a battlefield. It was a war between generations, between decency and depravity. I scrolled through them, my finger trembling. There were people my age, people with souls who were horrified. They wrote things like, "This is abuse," and "Someone call the police," and "How can a son stand by and watch this?" Reading those gave me a flicker of hope that the world had not gone completely mad. But then there were the others. The army of faceless children and trolls who worship at the altar of cruelty. They were posting laughing emojis. They were calling Ruby a Karen. One comment with 10,000 likes said she should be grateful for the free haircut, LOL. Another said, "Look at the old man raging, he needs to chill, it is just a prank." They called my pain content. They called my wife's humiliation a skit. Tiffany was active in the comments. She was hearting the insults. She was pinning a comment that said, "Tiffany, you are a savage queen." She had posted an update, a photo of her and Jamal holding glasses of champagne with the caption, "Haters gonna hate, but we stay winning." Link in bio for the clippers I used. She was selling the weapon. She had put an affiliate link to the electric clippers she used to shave my wife's head. She was making a commission on every sale. I heard a floorboard creak. Ruby was standing in the doorway. She was wearing her bathrobe and the silk scarf. Her eyes were swollen. She looked 10 years older than she had yesterday. "I can't go to church, Caleb," she whispered. "We never miss church, Ruby. Not in 40 years. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "Everyone has seen it. Deacon Jones, Sister Mary, the choir. They have all seen it, Caleb. I can't face them. I can't let them see me like this." I stood up and went to her. I held her while she cried into my chest. I felt her tears soaking through my shirt. I realized then that Tiffany hadn't just taken her hair. She had taken her community. She had taken her sanctuary. She had imprisoned my wife in her own home. "I am calling him," I said. I didn't wait for a reasonable hour. I called Jamal at 7. I told him to get his behind over here immediately. I told him to come alone. He arrived an hour later. He walked into the kitchen wearing sunglasses and a hoodie like he was a celebrity avoiding the paparazzi. He didn't look at his mother. He went straight to the coffee pot and poured himself a cup. "Rough night," he said, taking a sip. "My phone has been blowing up nonstop." "Sit down, Jamal," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. It was the calm of the eye of the hurricane. He sat. He drummed his fingers on the table. He looked impatient. "What is this about, Dad? We have a brunch with Tiffany's management team at noon." "Management team," I repeated. "You mean the people helping her monetize your mother's misery?" Jamal sighed. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot. "Dad, you are blowing this out of proportion. It is the internet. This is how it works. You prune something to make it grow. We needed a viral moment to launch our couple channel. The wedding was the perfect opportunity." "You call assault a viral moment?" I asked. "She shaved your mother's head, Jamal, without her permission. On her wedding day." "It is just hair, Dad," Jamal said, rolling his eyes. "It grows back. You are acting like she cut off a limb. It is keratin. It is dead cells." And honestly, Mom needed a new look. That silver bun was getting a little dated, don't you think? I looked at Ruby. She was sitting at the other end of the table, staring at her hands. She didn't say a word. She just shrank a little further into her chair. "And look at the results," Jamal continued, pulling out his phone. "We got 3 brand deals this morning, Dad. 3. A teeth whitening company, a sports betting app, and an energy drink. They want to sponsor our honeymoon. Do you know how much that is worth? We are talking 5 figures just for posting a few stories, so that is the price I asked." I leaned forward. "That is the exchange rate. Your mother's dignity for some free energy drinks and a gambling app." Jamal slammed his hand on the table. "You don't get it. You are stuck in the past. You worked for 40 years to build a company. That is the old way. We can make that kind of money in a month just by being interesting online. Tiffany is a genius, Dad. She knows what people want. They want shock value. They want drama, and she gave it to them." I looked at my son. I looked for the boy I taught to ride a bike. I looked for the young man who cried when his goldfish died. I looked for the man who stood by my side when I had my heart surgery. He wasn't there. The creature sitting across from me was a hollow shell. He had been eaten alive by the algorithm. He had traded his soul for engagement metrics. He didn't see his mother as a person anymore. He saw her as a prop, a non-player character in the video game of his wife's life. "Get out," I said. "What?" Jamal asked, blinking. "Get out of my house. And don't come back until you remember who gave you life." Jamal stood up. He laughed a cold, bitter sound. "Fine. Be that way. Wallow in your outdated morality. We are going to be rich. We are going to be famous. And when you see us on TV, don't come asking for a loan." He walked out. He didn't say goodbye to his mother. The door slammed shut, and the silence returned. But it was a heavy silence. It was the silence of a funeral. Ruby looked up at me. "He is gone. Caleb," she whispered. "Our boy is gone. He is dead." "Ruby," I said. My heart felt like a stone in my chest. The boy we raised died yesterday. That man who just left is a stranger. We spent the rest of the day in a daze. Ruby wouldn't leave the house. She wouldn't even go into the backyard to water her roses. She was afraid a drone might be overhead. She was afraid a neighbor might snap a picture over the fence. She was a prisoner. I sat in my study watching the view count climb. 6 million, 7 million. Every view was a lash on my back. Every share was a stab in my heart. Then at 5 o'clock the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Tiffany. I debated not answering. I wanted to throw the phone through the window, but I needed to know the enemy's next move. I pressed answer and put it on speaker so I could record the call on my iPad. "Hello, Tiffany," I said. "Hey, Pops," she chirped. Her voice was bright and airy, completely unaffected by the carnage she had caused. "How are you guys doing? Is Mom still crying, or has she gotten over it yet?" "What do you want, Tiffany?" I asked. "Well, I have some exciting news," she said. "So, you know how Jamal and I were supposed to go to Bali for our honeymoon? Well, we decided to postpone it. We are so busy with all these new opportunities we need to stay in Atlanta. And I asked, and well, our landlord just told us he needs to do some major renovations on our apartment, she said. Like emergency plumbing stuff. Mold, it is a health hazard, really. So we have to move out for a few months. I stayed silent. I knew exactly where this was going. So we thought since your house is so big and it is just you two old folks rattling around in there, we would come stay with you, she said. Just for a little while, maybe 3 or 4 months. It will be great. We can create so much content together. People are dying for a follow-up video with Mom. We could do a series, Ruby's Rehab. What do you think? I gripped the edge of my desk. The audacity was breathtaking. She humiliates us, monetizes it, and now she wants to move in to continue the torture. But then I remembered the text from my lawyer, the credit card debt, the $200,000. I realized she was lying. There was no mold. There were no renovations. They were being evicted. They were broke. The brand deals Jamal bragged about probably hadn't paid out yet, or they weren't enough to cover the hole they had dug. They were desperate, and they needed a place to hide. If I said no, they would disappear. They would go stay with friends or find a cheap motel, and I would lose track of them. I would lose my chance to expose them. But if I said yes, they would be under my roof. They would be on my territory. I could watch them. I could record them. I could let them dig their own graves right in my living room. Keep your friends close, my father used to say. Keep your enemies under the same roof. I took a deep breath. I forced my voice to sound tired and defeated. I forced myself to sound like the beaten-down old man they thought I was. Well, I said slowly, I don't know, Tiffany. Ruby is still very upset. Oh, come on, Caleb, she pressed. Don't be like that. It is family. Besides, we can pay rent. Well, not rent exactly, but we can handle the groceries. And think of the exposure for you. You guys could get famous too. I paused for a long, dramatic moment. Okay, I said. You can come. Yes, she squealed. You won't regret this, Pops. We will be there tomorrow morning. Get the guest room ready. Oh, and tell Ruby to practice her smile. We have work to do. She hung up. I sat there in the silence holding the phone. I looked at the recording on my iPad. I saved it under the file name Evidence. I walked out to the kitchen where Ruby was staring blankly at a cup of cold tea. They are moving in, I said. Ruby looked at me with horror. Caleb, why? How could you? Because Ruby, I said, sitting down and taking her hand. To catch a rat, you don't chase it. You put the cheese in the trap and you wait. They think they are moving into a free hotel. They think they are coming here to use us. But they are wrong. They are moving into a courtroom. And I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Tomorrow the real show begins. And this time I will be the one directing it. They did not move in like family, they moved in like an occupying army. It was barely 8 in the morning when the moving truck backed into my driveway, crushing the azaleas I had planted for Ruby on our 30th anniversary. Tiffany did not carry a single box. She stood on the front lawn in oversized sunglasses directing the movers while holding a cup of iced coffee she barely touched. Jamal was hauling suitcases, sweating through his shirt, looking like a bellboy in his own childhood home. When I opened the front door, Tiffany didn't say hello. She just walked past me, scanning the hallway with a critical eye. It smells like old people in here, she announced, wrinkling her nose. We are going to need some serious scented candles. Sage. Lots of sage. Then came the first demand, the first of many. So, Pops, she said, dropping her purse on the antique side table Ruby loved. Jamal and I talked about it, and obviously we need the master bedroom. It has the best natural light for my morning routine videos. Plus, the ensuite bathroom is the only one big enough for my skincare fridge and the lighting setup. I looked at Jamal. He was struggling with a massive garment bag filled with her clothes. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The master bedroom, I repeated slowly. That is where your mother and I sleep. That is where we have slept for 35 years. Yeah, I know, Tiffany said, waving her hand dismissively. But you guys don't really need all that space, do you? I mean, what do you do besides sleep? Jamal and I are working. We are creators. We need space to create. Besides, the guest room downstairs is cozy. It will be better for your knees not to have to climb the stairs, right? She wasn't asking. She was telling. And Jamal stood there, silent, complicit, allowing his wife to evict his parents from their own bed. I felt Ruby squeeze my arm. She was standing behind me. Let them have it, Caleb, she whispered. It is just a room. I don't want to fight. I just want peace. Peace. There was no peace coming. There was no... But I nodded. I let them have it because every demand they made, every inch they took was another nail in the coffin I was building for them. We spent the afternoon moving our lives into the small guest room on the ground floor. It was a cramped space with a single window that looked out onto the brick wall of the neighbor's garage. We moved our clothes, our medicines, the photos of our grandchildren. It felt like we were being erased in our own home. Upstairs, I could hear the sound of furniture being dragged across the hardwood floors. I could hear Tiffany laughing. By evening, the transformation was complete. My living room was no longer a living room. It was a studio. The comfortable armchairs where I used to read the newspaper were pushed into a corner piled high with boxes. In the center of the room stood 3 massive ring lights on tripods aimed at the sofa. There were reflectors, microphones, and wires snaking across the Persian rug like venomous snakes. Tiffany came down the stairs wearing a silk pajama set that probably cost more than my first car. "Okay, fam, time to work." She clapped her hands. "Mom, I need you." "Me?" Ruby asked, looking up from her knitting. "Yes, you," Tiffany said. "We are doing a segment called Classing Up My Country Mother-in-Law. It is going to be hilarious. I am going to teach you how to pronounce French wine names and how to walk in heels. The fans love the hair prank, so they are dying for more content with you." "I don't want to," Ruby said softly. "Oh, come on, don't be a spoil sport." Tiffany snapped, her voice turning hard. "Do you want to support your son or not? We need this video to hit the algorithm tonight. Get up. I have an outfit for you." She forced my wife to change into a tight, uncomfortable dress that was far too young for her. She put heavy makeup on her face, covering Ruby's natural beauty with layers of contour and highlighter. Then she turned on the cameras. For 2 hours, I sat in the kitchen listening. I heard Tiffany's fake sweet voice for the camera, followed by her sharp, cruel commands when the recording stopped. "Smile bigger, Ruby. No, not like that, you look scared. God, act natural. Okay, let's try it again. Try not to sound so uneducated this time, okay?" My hands were shaking. I was gripping my coffee mug so hard I thought it would shatter. I wanted to march in there and tear those lights down. I wanted to throw them out on the street. But I forced myself to sit still. I forced myself to remember the plan. While they were distracted with their filming, I went to work. I had gone to the spy shop downtown the day before. I had a bag full of equipment that looked like innocent household items. I went into the kitchen. I placed a new air freshener on the counter. Inside it was a high-definition audio recorder with a battery life of 2 weeks. I went into the hallway. I replaced the smoke detector with one that had a pinhole camera. I went into the master bedroom while they were downstairs. I placed a small black box behind the books on the shelf facing the bed. I was bugging my own house. It felt dirty. It felt wrong. But I knew that what they showed the world was a lie, and I needed to capture the truth. That night, I lay awake in the cramped guest bed listening to the floorboards creak above us. I put on my headphones and tuned into the feed from the kitchen recorder. They were in there getting a late-night snack. "I can't believe I have to live in this dump." Tiffany's voice came through clear as a bell. "It smells like mothballs and failure. And your dad. God, Jamal, he stares at me like a creep. He is just old, babe." Jamal's voice sounded tired. "He doesn't mean anything by it." "He is useless," Tiffany spat. "And your mom is so pathetic. Did you see her trying to walk in those heels? I almost died laughing. She looked like a baby giraffe. I can't believe people actually watch this garbage." "Hey, don't talk about her like that," Jamal said weakly. "Oh, shut up," Tiffany snapped. "I will talk about her however I want. I am the one making the money here. I am the one saving your ass from bankruptcy. You are just lucky I am talented enough to spin your boring family into gold. You are just a mama's boy, Jamal. Without me, you would be nothing. Just another loser working a 9 to 5. I heard the sound of a slap, not a hard one, a humiliating one, like a master disciplining a dog. "Get me a Diet Coke," Tiffany ordered. "And don't spill it this time." I took off the headphones. My heart was pounding. I had it. I had the abuse. I had the admission of their financial ruin. I had the proof that Jamal was not a partner in this marriage, but a hostage. But the next day, things got worse. Much worse. I had a collection. It wasn't much to the outside world, but to me it was everything. Since I was 20 years old, I had been collecting jazz vinyls, original pressings, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. Some of them were signed. They were kept in a custom-built shelf in the corner of the living room. That corner was my sanctuary. I would sit there on Sunday afternoons, put on a record, and close my eyes, and for a moment, I wasn't an old man with a heavy heart. I was young again. I came home from the grocery store carrying the bags because Jamal claimed his back hurt too much to help. As I walked through the front door, I felt a shift in the air. The living room looked different, brighter. The shelf was gone. My corner, my sanctuary. It was empty. In its place stood a massive green screen backdrop and a rack of Tiffany's sequined dresses. I dropped the grocery bags. A carton of milk burst, spreading a white puddle across the floor. "Where are they?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Tiffany looked up from her phone. She was lounging on the sofa, picking at her nails. "Where are—" what she asked, not even looking at me. "My records," I said, the volume of my voice rising. "My vinyls. Where are they, Tiffany?" "Oh, those dusty old things," she laughed. "They were taking up so much space, Pops, and they smelled musty. We needed that corner for the green screen. The lighting there is perfect for my fashion hauls." "Where are they?" I roared. Tiffany flinched. She looked at Jamal, who was hiding in the kitchen. "I put them in the bin," she said, shrugging. "The recycling bin came this morning. They are gone, Caleb." "Relax. Nobody listens to that screeching noise anyway. You can listen to music on Spotify like a normal person." I ran. I ran out the back door faster than I had run in 20 years. I ran to the alley where the large recycling dumpsters sat. The truck had just left. I could see the taillights turning the corner at the end of the block. I stood there staring at the empty space where the dumpster had been. My history, my memories. The record Ruby and I danced to on our first date. The album my father gave me before he died. All of it. Crushed, compacted, gone. I fell to my knees on the dirty asphalt. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I felt a cold, hard stone form in the pit of my stomach. She didn't just want space. She wanted to erase me. She wanted to scrub this house of any evidence that Otis and Ruby Johnson had ever lived here, had ever loved here. She saw us as debris, as clutter to be cleared away to make room for her ego. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. I brushed the dirt off my trousers. I walked back into the house. Tiffany was filming again. She was holding up a dress, talking to her phone. "So guys, I just cleared out so much bad energy from this room," she was saying. "It feels so much lighter in here now. Out with the old, in with the new, right?" She saw me standing in the doorway. She saw the look on my face. For a second, she faltered. She saw something in my eyes that scared her. But then she remembered who she was. She remembered that I was just an old man living in her guest room. "Don't look so tragic, Caleb," she said, rolling her eyes. "I did you a favor. Decluttering is good for the soul." I walked past her. I didn't say a word. I went into the kitchen where Jamal was pretending to wash a dish. He wouldn't look at me. He knew what those records meant. He knew. I walked past him, too. I went into the guest room and closed the door. Ruby was sitting on the bed. She knew. She had heard me yelling. "They are gone," she asked softly. "They are gone," I said. She stood up and hugged me. She held me tight, rocking me like a child. "I am sorry, Caleb. I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said, pulling back. My voice was steady. My hands were steady. I went to the closet and pulled out my suit carrier, the one with my best suit, the one I wore to board meetings, the one I wore when I signed the deal to sell my company for $50 million. "What are you doing?" Ruby asked. "I am going out," I said. "Where?" "I am going to see Arthur," I said. "I am going to see the bank. And then I am going to buy a building." "A building?" Ruby asked, confused. "Yes," I said, zipping up the bag, "because when I kick them out of this house, Ruby, I want to make sure they have absolutely nowhere left to go. She threw away my past, so I am going to foreclose on her future." I walked out of that room and I didn't look at the empty corner where my music used to live. I didn't look at Tiffany. I didn't look at Jamal. I walked out the front door, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't Caleb the retired grandfather. I was Caleb the CEO. And I was about to execute the most hostile takeover this family had ever seen. Thinking I was safe in my own home was a mistake. They were everywhere. The cameras were set up in the hallway, the living room, even the kitchen. I had to walk carefully, keeping my head down, avoiding eye contact with the lenses that seemed to follow me like the eyes of a predator. I became a ghost, haunting the edges of their reality show. 2 days after they moved in, the mail arrived. Usually I picked it up, but Tiffany had insisted on checking the mailbox first, claiming she was expecting PR packages from major brands. But that morning she was busy screaming at Jamal about a lighting malfunction, so I walked down the driveway myself. There was a thick envelope. It wasn't a PR package. It was a certified letter from a company called Apex Capital. It was addressed to Jamal Johnson, but the address listed was my house. My address. I knew Apex Capital. They weren't a bank. They were a hard money lender. The kind of place you go when the banks have already laughed you out of the building. The kind of place that charges 30% interest and breaks kneecaps legally. I took the letter into the garage where I kept my old toolbox. My hands were trembling not with age but with a cold, creeping dread. I carefully steamed the envelope open over my electric kettle. Inside was a notice of default and intent to foreclose. My eyes scanned the document. The borrower was Jamal Johnson. The collateral was 452 Oakwood Drive. My house. My home. The house I had built brick by brick. The house I owned free and clear, or so I thought. But there, at the bottom of the loan agreement, was a signature. Caleb Johnson. It was my name. But it wasn't my hand. The loop on the J was too wide. The C was too sharp. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery made by a son who thought his father was too senile to notice. He had stolen my house. He had forged my signature to take out a high-interest loan of $300,000 against the only asset I had left in my name. And he hadn't paid a dime in 4 months. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the calm of a man who realizes he has nothing left to lose. I put the letter in my pocket. I got in my car and drove straight to Arthur's office. Arthur is a man of few words. He looked at the document, he adjusted his glasses, and he sighed. "This is bad, Caleb," he said. "They filed a fraudulent deed of trust. Jamal must have had a notary in his pocket, or he used a fake ID. Technically, they can foreclose. We can fight it, prove the forgery, but that takes time. And in the meantime, they can put a lien on the property." "Can I press charges?" I asked. Arthur looked at me over his glasses. "You can. But that means sending Jamal to prison. Forgery, wire fraud, grand larceny. We are talking 10 years minimum. Are you ready to do that, Caleb?" I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. I remembered teaching Jamal to fish. I remembered his first baseball game. I remembered the pride in his eyes when he graduated college. Then I remembered the sound of the clippers. I remembered Ruby's tears. I remembered the way he looked at his phone instead of his mother. "He put himself in this prison, Arthur," I said. "I am just locking the door." "Prepare the paperwork," I told him. "But don't file it yet. I need one more thing. I need them to confess. I need it on tape." I drove back home. The house was quiet for once. Tiffany and Jamal were in the kitchen arguing in hushed tones. I walked in. I put the envelope on the table between them. "What is this?" I asked. Jamal turned white. He looked like he was going to vomit. Tiffany didn't even blink. She picked up the letter, read it, and tossed it back on the table like it was a piece of junk mail. "Oh, that," she said. "Yeah, we need to talk about that. You forged my signature," I said, looking at Jamal. "You stole my house. I didn't steal it," Jamal stammered. "I just borrowed against it. It was an investment, Dad. Tiffany had this amazing opportunity to launch her own makeup line. We needed capital. The banks were too slow. We were going to pay it back next month. I swear. Next month," I repeated. "They are foreclosing next week, Jamal." "So fix it," Tiffany interrupted. She stood up, crossing her arms. "You have money, Caleb. We know you have a retirement fund. We know you have savings. Just pay it off." "Pay it off?" I asked, incredulous. "You steal my home, you lie to me, and now you want me to pay for your crime. It is not a crime, it is business," she snapped. "And yes, you should pay it off. Because if you don't, we all lose the house. And where will you go then?" "A nursing home. A shelter." She took a step closer to me. Her perfume was cloying, sickeningly sweet. "Listen to me, old man," she hissed. "You are going to go to the bank tomorrow. You are going to withdraw $300,000. And you are going to give it to us to clear this debt. And if I don't," I asked. She smiled. It was the smile of a shark. "If you don't, I will ruin you. I have hours of footage, Caleb. I can edit anything to look like anything. I can make you look like a monster. I can make you look like a pervert." "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "I will tell my followers that you touch me," she said. Her voice was casual, as if she were discussing the weather. "I will tell them you creep into my room at night. I will tell them you harass me. I will cry on camera. I will show them bruises that I can paint on with makeup in 5 minutes. Do you know what the internet does to men accused of that, Caleb? They shred them. You will never be able to show your face in this town again. Your church friends, your neighbors, they will all spit on you." I looked at Jamal. He was staring at the floor, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Jamal," I said, "you hear this? You hear what she is saying?" He looked up. His eyes were dead. "Just do it, Dad," he whispered. "Please. Just give her the money. She will do it. She really will." I looked at my son, and in that moment the last thread of hope snapped. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was an accomplice. He was willing to let his wife frame his own father for a heinous crime just to save his own skin. My heart broke, but my resolve hardened into diamond. "Okay," I said. My voice trembled. I made sure it trembled. I let my shoulders slump. I let the fear show in my eyes. "Okay. You win. Please don't do that, Tiffany. Please. I can't handle that shame." "Good choice," Tiffany said, patting my cheek. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? We are family after all. We help each other." "I will go to the bank tomorrow," I said. "It will take a few days to clear the funds. It is a lot of money." "Fine," she said, "but don't try anything funny. I have the video drafted already. 1 click and your life is over." I walked out of the kitchen. I walked down the hall to the guest room. I closed the door and locked it. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From rage. Pure, cold rage. She threatened to destroy my name. She threatened to label me a predator. She crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. I reached under the bed and pulled out the small recording device I had taped there. I checked the battery. I checked the signal. I had it all. The threat, the blackmail, the admission of the forgery. I didn't need to go to the bank. I needed to go to war. I picked up my phone and texted Arthur. "File it. File everything. And call the sheriff. I want them out. But not yet. Not until I have my own show ready." I lay back on the pillow. I closed my eyes. I could hear Tiffany laughing in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine to celebrate her victory. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She didn't know that she had just signed her own death warrant. She wanted $300,000. I was going to give her a bill she could never pay. The morning started with a lie. It was a Tuesday, and the house was uncharacteristically quiet. There were no ring lights set up in the living room and no loud music blaring from the portable speakers Tiffany dragged from room to room. I should have known that silence in a house occupied by a viper is not peace. It is an ambush. I found Ruby in the kitchen, sitting at the small breakfast table we had squeezed into the corner. She looked tired. The stress of the last week, the loss of her hair, and the invasion of her home had drained the light from her eyes. Tiffany was standing at the counter, humming to herself. She was wearing a pink apron over her designer tracksuit, chopping kale and cucumber with a manic energy. "Good morning, Pops," she chirped without looking up. "I am making Ruby a special detox smoothie. It is a celebrity recipe, very exclusive. It is going to help her hair grow back faster and give her glowing skin." I looked at the blender. It was filled with a thick green sludge. I didn't trust anything that girl touched, but Ruby smiled at me, a weak, tentative smile. "She is trying, Caleb," Ruby whispered. "Maybe she wants to make amends. It is just vegetables. What harm can it do?" I wanted to snatch the glass away, but I was trying to play the long game. I was trying to gather evidence. So I sat down and watched as Tiffany poured the green mixture into a tall glass. She placed it in front of Ruby with a flourish. "Drink up, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "You have to drink it all at once for it to activate. It is full of antioxidants." Ruby took the glass. She hesitated for a moment, sniffing the concoction. It smelled earthy and bitter, but she wanted so badly to believe that this girl had a heart. She wanted so badly to bridge the gap for Jamal's sake. So she drank it. She drank the whole thing in 3 long gulps, grimacing at the taste. "Good girl." Tiffany clapped her hands. "You are going to feel so much lighter. Trust me." I went to my room to check the audio logs from the previous night, leaving them alone for 20 minutes. That was my mistake. I left my wife alone with a wolf. When I came back out, the house was filled with a sound that chilled my blood. It was Ruby groaning. I ran to the living room. Ruby was doubled over on the sofa, clutching her stomach. Her face was gray. Sweat was beading on her forehead, soaking the rim of her wig. "My stomach," she gasped. "Caleb, my stomach. It feels like fire." Tiffany was standing across the room. She wasn't helping. She was holding her phone positioned behind a potted plant so the lens could see everything, but it wasn't obvious she was filming. "It is just the toxins leaving your body," Mom Tiffany called out. Her voice was calm, too calm. "It means it is working. Just breathe through it." I rushed to Ruby's side. Her skin was clammy and cold. This wasn't a detox, this was poison. "What did you put in that drink?" I shouted at Tiffany. "Just fiber," she shrugged. "And maybe a little colon cleanse tea. Okay, maybe 3 bags, or 4. She needs to flush out the system, Caleb. She is full of negative energy. 4 bags of laxative tea, for a 70-year-old woman with high blood pressure." Ruby let out a sharp cry and scrambled up from the sofa. She ran to the bathroom down the hall. I heard the door slam and then the sounds of violent illness. I turned on Tiffany. "You poisoned her." "Relax, Pops," she laughed. "It is just a prank, a detox prank. The internet loves these. People pay money for cleanses like this. I wanted to strike her, I really did. But I heard Ruby calling my name from the bathroom. Her voice was weak, thready. I ran to the bathroom door. "Ruby, are you okay?" "Caleb, help me," she whispered. "I feel dizzy." I opened the door. Ruby was slumped against the wall, her eyes rolling back in her head. She was severely dehydrated, her body going into shock from the sudden fluid loss. As I reached for her, she slumped forward into my arms, unconscious. "Ruby," I screamed. "Ruby, wake up!" I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone twice. "Get the paramedics here now!" I yelled into the receiver. "My wife is unconscious. Possible poisoning." I looked up. Tiffany was standing in the hallway doorway. She wasn't calling for help. She was holding her phone up, zooming in on my unconscious wife slumped on the bathroom tiles. "Oh my God, guys," she whispered to her followers, her voice trembling with fake concern. Mom passed out. "This detox is crazy powerful. Pray for her. Get out of here," I roared. The next hour was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. I rode in the back of the ambulance, holding Ruby's hand, watching the heart monitor beep. Her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. The paramedics were pushing fluids, trying to stabilize her. Jamal met us at the hospital. He didn't look worried. He looked annoyed. "Is she okay?" he asked, walking into the waiting room. "Tiffany said she just had a tummy ache. You guys always overreact." "Overreact," I whispered. "She is in the emergency room, Jamal. Her kidneys are under stress. She could have died." Tiffany walked in behind him. She had changed her outfit. She was wearing a hoodie and had messed up her hair to look distraught. She had her phone out. "Where is she?" Tiffany asked, scanning the room. "Can we go in? I want to live stream a prayer circle for her. My followers are really worried." I stood up. The air in the waiting room seemed to vanish. I felt a pressure in my chest that wasn't a heart attack. It was the explosion of a lifetime of restraint. "You are not going in there," I said. "You are not going near her." Tiffany rolled her eyes. She held the phone up, pointing it at my face. "Look how stressed he is, guys," she said to the camera. "Poor Pops. He doesn't understand that positive vibes help healing. Everyone drop a heart in the chat for Caleb. That red dot, that recording light, it was a laser pointer aimed at my soul. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I moved with the speed of a man half my age. I reached out and snatched the phone from her hand. "Hey," she shrieked, "give that back!" I looked at the device. I saw the comments rolling in. I saw the faces of strangers consuming my wife's pain as entertainment. I turned and threw the phone as hard as I could against the concrete wall of the waiting room. The sound was satisfying. It was a crunch followed by the tinkling of shattered glass. The device fell to the floor, a twisted piece of metal and silicone. The screen was black. The eye was closed. Silence fell over the waiting room. A nurse stopped at the desk. A doctor looked up from his chart. Tiffany stared at the broken pieces on the floor. Her mouth hung open. Then I felt a shove. 2 hands pushed hard against my chest, sending me stumbling backward. I lost my footing and fell into the hard plastic chairs, my hip hitting the armrest with a sickening crack. I looked up. It wasn't security. It wasn't the police. It was Jamal. My son was standing over me, his face twisted in rage. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the phone. "Are you crazy?" he screamed. "Are you actually crazy, old man?" "That is the iPhone 15 Pro Max. We haven't even paid it off yet. Do you know how much data was on there?" He ran to the phone, picking up the pieces, trying to fit them back together like a desperate child. I lay there on the floor. My hip throbbed, but the pain in my body was nothing compared to the clarity in my mind. He pushed me, his father. He pushed me to the ground for a piece of glass. Tiffany was crying now, real tears. Not for Ruby, but for her toy. "My footage," she wailed. "I didn't upload the last part. It is gone. It is all gone." Jamal turned to me. "You are paying for this," he spat. "I don't care if you are my father. You are buying her a new one today. You are a danger to everyone. Maybe Tiffany is right. Maybe you belong in a home." I looked at the doctor standing nearby. He had seen everything. He signaled to a security guard, but I raised my hand to stop him. I didn't need security. I didn't need help. I slowly pulled myself up. I adjusted my jacket. I brushed the dust off my sleeve. The pain in my hip was sharp, but I stood tall. I stood straighter than I had in years. I looked at Jamal. He was still fawning over the broken phone, wiping the dust off the lens. I looked at Tiffany. She was sobbing about her lost content. Something died in that waiting room. The father who made excuses for his son died. The grandfather who wanted peace died. The man who tried to be gentle died. Caleb Johnson, the CEO, was back. The man who crushed competitors without blinking was back. The man who knew that in business and in war there is no mercy for traitors was back. "I am not buying you a phone," I said. My voice was low. It didn't tremble. It didn't waver. It cut through the room like a scalpel. Jamal looked up, surprised by the tone. "And I am not going to a home," I continued. I walked past them toward the door to the trauma unit where my wife lay. I stopped and looked back one last time. "Enjoy that broken phone, Jamal, because it is the last thing you will ever own." I turned my back on them. I walked through the double doors. I had a wife to save, and once she was safe, I had a war to win. The time for gathering evidence was over. The time for execution had begun. I walked out of those automatic hospital doors, and the humid Atlanta air hit me like a physical weight. It was raining, a soft, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement and blurred the city lights. I stood there for a moment, watching the cars hiss by on the wet asphalt. My hip was throbbing a dull, rhythmic ache where I had hit the chair, but I didn't reach for my cane. I didn't rub it. That pain was necessary. It was a reminder. It was the fuel I needed to burn down the bridge back to my old life. I hailed a cab. The driver, a young man with tired eyes, asked me where I was going. I almost said, "home." The word formed on my lips out of habit. 452 Oakwood Drive, 52 Oakwood. The place where I raised my son. The place where I planted azaleas. The place where I was currently sleeping in a guest room while my tormentors slept in my bed. "Take me to the St. Regis," I said instead. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. He took in my slightly rumpled jacket, the dust on my sleeve from the hospital floor, the grim set of my jaw. "That is a fancy place, Pop," he said. "You meeting someone there?" "I am meeting myself," I said, "the man I used to be." When the cab pulled up to the hotel, the doorman stepped forward with an umbrella. He was new, young, and efficient. He didn't know me. But as I walked through the revolving doors and into the lobby, the scent of white tea and old money wrapped around me like a familiar coat. I walked to the front desk. The manager, a woman named Eleanor, who had started as a concierge 20 years ago, looked up. Her professional smile froze for a second, then transformed into genuine warmth. "Mr. Johnson," she breathed, coming around the counter. "We haven't seen you in years. Is everything all right?" "I need a room, Eleanor," I said. "I need the penthouse, and I need it for an indefinite period." She didn't ask for a credit card. She didn't ask for a reservation. She knew who I was. She knew that I owned 15% of the hospitality group that owned this building. She knew that my signature was worth more than the gold leaf on the ceiling. "Of course, Mr. Johnson," she said, typing furiously. "We will have it ready in 5 minutes. Shall I order you some dinner?" "A scotch," I said, "the oldest you have, and a secure phone line." Up in the suite, the city of Atlanta sprawled out below me, a grid of light and ambition. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the ants scurrying below. Somewhere out there in that wet darkness, Tiffany and Jamal were probably driving back to my house. They were probably complaining about the broken phone. They were probably eating my food, drinking my wine, and plotting their next video. They thought I was wandering the streets. They thought I was a confused old man who would eventually come crawling back, apologizing for my outburst, begging to be let in out of the cold. They were wrong. I went into the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of Caleb Johnson, the man who had negotiated merger deals that left his competitors weeping in the parking lot. The man who had built a logistics empire by knowing exactly when to squeeze and when to crush. I walked back into the living area, took a sip of the amber liquid Eleanor had sent up, and picked up the secure phone. It was time to make the call. I dialed a number I hadn't used since my retirement party. It rang twice. "Hello?" a voice answered. It was deep, gravelly, and sounded like money. "Julian," I said. "It is Caleb." There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. Then a low chuckle. "Caleb Johnson, the ghost of Atlanta business. To what do I owe the pleasure? I thought you were busy growing roses and spoiling your grandkids." "I was," I said. "But the roses are dead, Julian, and I need to go hunting." "What are we hunting?" Julian asked. The humor left his voice replaced by the sharp interest of a predator smelling blood. "Rats," I said. "I have a pest control problem, Julian. A very public, very loud pest control problem. I need you to help me build a trap." I spent the next hour laying it out. Julian owned one of the biggest media holding companies in the South. He controlled magazines, websites, and talent agencies. He knew the influencer game better than Tiffany could ever hope to. I told him everything: the wedding, the haircut, the debt, the humiliation. When I finished, the silence on the other line was deafening. "That is your blood," Caleb Julian said finally, his voice quiet. "Not anymore," I said. "My blood doesn't poison my wife. My blood doesn't steal my home. So what do you need?" Julian asked. "I need a shell," I said. "I need a company that looks like the Holy Grail. I need a website that smells like billions. I need a venture capital firm that specializes in family brands. We are going to call it CJ Ventures." CJ Julian laughed. Subtle. "She is too narcissistic to notice," I said. "She won't see my initials. She will only see the dollar signs. I need you to leak a rumor, Julian. I need you to whisper in the right ears. Tell your editors to talk about a mystery investor looking for the next Kardashian family. Tell them there is a $5 million contract on the table for a family with high engagement and raw, authentic drama. $5 million. Julian whistled. "That is a big piece of cheese, Caleb. She is a big rat," I said. "She needs to believe she has won the lottery. I want her to think she is being scouted by the elite. I want her to think she is too big for Atlanta." "Consider it done," Julian said. "I will have the website up by morning. I will have my people reach out to her management. By noon tomorrow, she will be salivating." I hung up. Then I called Arthur. "I need the paperwork for CJ Ventures," I told him. "And I need an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement so tight it would make a CIA agent sweat. If she signs it and then breaches it, I want to be able to take everything. Her name, her image, her future earnings." "You are going to entrap her," Arthur said. "I am going to give her exactly what she wants," I said. "She wants fame. I am going to give her a stage. I am just going to control the trap door." I sat in that leather chair, watching the rain stop. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of moon. I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't happiness. It was the clarity of purpose. For the last week I had been reacting. I had been defensive. Now I was on the offense. I opened my laptop. I created a secure email address. director@cjventuresglobal.com. I started drafting the email. I made it sound corporate, distant, and incredibly exclusive. "Dear Ms. Tiffany Style, we have been monitoring your recent growth metrics with great interest. Your ability to generate high engagement content in the family lifestyle sector aligns with our current investment portfolio. CJ Ventures is currently seeking one flagship family for a strategic partnership. This partnership includes a $5 million capital injection, brand restructuring, and a global distribution deal. We value authenticity. We value drama. We value the willingness to push boundaries. If you are interested in discussing this opportunity further, please reply to schedule a preliminary screening. Note that this invitation is confidential and time-sensitive. Sincerely, the Board of Directors." I hovered my finger over the send button. I knew what this meant. Once I sent this, there was no going back. I was actively deceiving my son and his wife. I was playing a game that would end in their total destruction. I thought about Ruby. I thought about her lying in that hospital bed, her body ravaged by laxatives, her spirit broken by ridicule. I thought about the way she looked in that wig, terrified to move her head. I pressed send. I poured myself another glass of scotch. I didn't have to wait long. Tiffany was an addict. Her drug was validation and her dealer was the internet. She would be glued to her phone even now, probably scrolling through her emails looking for brand deals to replace the ones she had lost. 10 minutes. That was all it took. My laptop pinged. A reply. Oh my God. Yes. We are very interested. We are the most authentic family on TikTok. We are ready to take this to the next level. When can we meet? We can clear our schedule immediately. I read her words and I felt a cold smile spread across my face. She didn't ask who we were. She didn't ask for references. She didn't ask about the terms. She just saw the number 5 million and she bit down hard on the hook. I typed a reply. Excellent. Our senior partner will be in touch. Prepare your financials. Prepare your legal documents and prepare your family. We want to see everything. I closed the laptop. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was reel her in slowly, carefully, and let her think she was swimming upstream to paradise when in reality she was being pulled straight onto the cutting board. I finished my drink and stood up. I walked to the bedroom of the suite. The bed was huge, covered in white linens. It was empty. I missed Ruby. I missed the sound of her breathing. I missed the warmth of her back against mine. I picked up the hotel phone one last time. Eleanor, I said. Yes, Mr. Johnson. Send a car to the hospital tomorrow morning, I said. My wife will be discharged. Bring her here. And Eleanor. Yes, sir. Fill the room with roses, I said. White roses. Hundreds of them. And find the best wig maker in the city. Have them come here at noon. I hung up. Tomorrow Ruby would come here to a sanctuary. And tomorrow Tiffany would step into the slaughterhouse. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one making it. I sat in the penthouse suite watching the live stream of my own life on a secure tablet. Julian had been true to his word. The offices of CJ Ventures looked like the headquarters of a Bond villain or a tech god. It was all chrome and glass, located on the 45th floor of the Sovereign building with a view that cost more than my entire first neighborhood. I watched through the hidden camera lens in the conference room as Tiffany and Jamal walked in. They looked small. That was the first thing I noticed. In my house, they took up so much space with their noise and their ego, but here in the halls of real power, they looked like children playing dress-up. Tiffany was wearing a white suit that she probably thought looked professional, but was cut too low and fit too tight. Jamal was wearing a suit I had bought him for his graduation 5 years ago. It was tight around the shoulders. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at his collar, his eyes darting around the room, trying to appraise the value of the art on the walls. They were greeted by Mr. Sterling. Sterling was an actor. Julian had hired a man with a voice like velvet and eyes like flint. He had played judges and CEOs in movies for 20 years. He knew how to command a room. "Welcome to CJ Ventures," Sterling said, not offering his hand. "Please sit." Tiffany sat down so fast she almost missed the chair. She was vibrating with excitement. I could see the greed radiating off her like heat waves off hot asphalt. So she started, her voice high and breathless. "The email said $5 million. Is that real? Like actual money?" Sterling didn't smile. He opened a leather folder. "We don't joke about money, Mrs. Johnson. We have analyzed your metrics, the video of you and your mother-in-law, the haircut, the conflict. It is raw. It is visceral. It is exactly what the market wants. We want to sign the Johnson family as our flagship reality brand." Jamal leaned forward. "So you want to sponsor our channel?" "No," Sterling said. "We want to own it. We want to buy the rights to your lives for the next 3 years. $5 million up front. Another $5 million in performance bonuses if you hit certain viewership targets." I saw Jamal stop breathing. I saw Tiffany's eyes roll back in her head for a second. $10 million. It was enough to solve their debt 50 times over. It was enough to buy the fame they were so desperate for. But Sterling continued, his timing perfect. "However, there are conditions. Strict conditions. Anything Tiffany said. I will do anything." "First," Sterling said, tapping a document, "the setting is crucial. Our analysts love the house. The classic architecture, the old money aesthetic. It grounds the drama. We need proof that you own the property. We can't have a landlord evicting our stars in the middle of production. We need the deed, Mrs. Johnson. Clear title in your name or your husband's name. I watched Jamal swallow hard. He shifted in his seat. He knew the deed was in my name. He knew the fraudulent loan he had taken out was a ticking time bomb. But greed makes people stupid. No problem. Jamal lied, his voice cracking. We handle all the family assets. The deed is accessible. Excellent, Sterling said. Second condition. The cast. The internet is fascinated by the patriarch. Caleb, the silent, brooding father figure. The tension between him and the modern world is the hook. We need him signed. We need his full cooperation. If Caleb doesn't sign, the deal is off. The room went silent. Tiffany looked at Jamal. Jamal looked at his shoes. They knew. They knew they had just pushed me to the ground in a hospital waiting room. They knew they had insulted me, robbed me, and treated me like garbage. He will do it, Tiffany said quickly. Her voice was too loud. He loves us. He is just a little grumpy sometimes, but he will do whatever we say. He is manageable. Good, Sterling said, closing the folder. You have 24 hours. Bring the deed and bring Caleb to the signing ceremony tomorrow at noon. If you are late, the offer expires and we move on to the next family. The feed cut out as they left the office. I sat back in my chair. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady, manageable. That is what she called me, like I was a stubborn pet or an unruly employee. I checked my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. I needed to get back to the house. I needed to be there when they arrived. I needed to be the mouse waiting for the cat. I left the hotel. I stopped at a florist on the way, not for Ruby, but for the house. I bought a single white lily. I placed it in the vase on the kitchen table when I got home. The house was empty. The silence was heavy. I went into the guest room and changed out of my suit into my old cardigan and house slippers. I ruffled my hair to look disheveled. I practiced my slump in the mirror. I needed to look defeated. I needed to look like a man who had given up. I heard their car pull into the driveway an hour later. Car doors slammed. I heard Tiffany's voice shrill and excited even through the brick walls. We are going to be rich, Jamal, rich. Who cares about the debt? We can pay it all off tomorrow. They burst into the house. The energy they brought with them was manic. Pops, Tiffany yelled. Pops, where are you? I walked out of the guest room, moving slowly, leaning heavily on the door frame. I am here, I said softly. Tiffany ran to me. She didn't hug me, but she stopped just short, vibrating with energy. She was holding bags from an expensive grocery store. Oh, Pops, I am so glad you are home. Look, we bought steaks and lobster. I am going to cook tonight a real family dinner. I looked at Jamal. He was carrying a bag from the Apple store. He walked over to me and held it out. Here, Dad, he mumbled. A new phone. It is the latest model. Better than the one you broke. I even set it up for you. I looked at the box. It was a peace offering bought with credit card debt on a card that was probably maxed out. Thank you, I said, taking it. Tiffany clapped her hands. Great. Now go sit down, Pops. Put your feet up. You look tired. Jamal, get your dad a drink. I am going to whip up a feast. I sat in the living room in the chair they had pushed into the corner. I watched them perform. It was a performance, a grotesque pantomime of a happy family. Tiffany was humming in the kitchen, rattling pans. Jamal brought me a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking slightly as he handed it to me. I am sorry about the hospital, Dad, he said, not meeting my eyes. I was just stressed. You know, the wedding, the move, it is a lot. It is okay, son. I lied, I know. Pressure does terrible things to a man. He looked relieved. He actually believed it. He believed that a few $100s of electronics and a glass of whiskey could erase the memory of him shoving his father to the floor. Dinner was a disaster. The steak was overcooked, the lobster was rubbery, but they ate it like it was manna from heaven. They poured wine, they laughed too loudly at my small comments. Finally, the plates were cleared. Tiffany leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, looking at me with wide, innocent eyes. So, Pops, she started. We have some amazing news, like life-changing news. Oh, I asked. We got an offer, Jamal jumped in. A business offer. From a huge investment firm. They want to partner with us. With the whole family. They want to give us $5 million, Tiffany blurted out. 5 million. Can you imagine? That is a lot of money, I said. It is, she nodded. It changes everything. We can fix the house. We can get Ruby the best doctors. We can take care of you guys forever. You won't have to worry about a single bill ever again. I took a sip of my drink. I waited. But there is a catch, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. They love you, Pops. They think you are amazing. They saw the videos and they think you have this incredible presence. They want you to be part of the deal. Me? I asked, feigning surprise. But I am just a grumpy old man. You said so yourself. Oh, I was just joking. You know how we joke? She laughed, a brittle sound. No, they love you. They want you to sign with us. It is just a formality, really. Just a signature that says you are on board with the family business. I looked at the table. I traced the grain of the wood with my finger. I don't know, Tiffany, I said slowly. I am tired. I don't like cameras. I don't like people laughing at my wife. They won't laugh. She promised, reaching across the table to grab my hand. Her skin was cold. This will be different. High class, documentary style. We will control the narrative. Please, Pops, do it for Jamal. Do it for the family. I looked at Jamal. He was pleading with his eyes. He was begging me to save him from the hole he had dug. I pulled my hand away. I will do it, I said. They both exhaled a massive sigh of relief. Tiffany almost jumped out of her chair. But I said, raising my voice slightly, I have a condition. Anything, Tiffany said. Name it. You want a new car? A boat? A vacation? I want an apology, I said. An apology, she blinked. Yes, I want you to apologize to Ruby. And not just to her face. I want you to apologize to the world. What do you mean? She asked, her smile fading. You shaved her head on a live stream, I said. You humiliated her in front of 5 million people. If you want me to sign a contract to be on camera again, I need to know that my dignity is safe. I need to know that you regret what you did. So I want you to do a live stream tonight. Right now, I want you to sit in front of that camera and tell your followers that what you did was wrong, that it wasn't a prank, that it was cruel, and that you are sorry. Tiffany stiffened. But that will hurt the brand. My followers like the edge. If I apologize, I look weak. Then I don't sign, I said simply. I stood up. $5 million, Tiffany. Is your pride worth $5 million? She looked at Jamal. Jamal looked at the ceiling. Do it, Tiff, he whispered. Just do it. Who cares? It is just words. She clenched her jaw. She looked at me with pure hatred. She knew I had cornered her. She knew I was making her kneel. Fine, she spat. Fine, I will do it. Set it up, I said. I will watch from here. She stomped into the living room. She turned on the ring lights. She fixed her hair. She put on her sad face. It was amazing to watch the transformation. In seconds, she went from a rage-filled harpy to a contrite little girl. She hit record. Hey guys, she whispered to the camera. I just wanted to come on here and get real for a second. I have been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized that I made a mistake. I stood in the doorway watching her lie. She cried fake tears. She talked about how much she loved her mother-in-law. She talked about learning and growing. It was a masterclass in manipulation. But I wasn't listening to the words. I was looking at the phone in my hand. I was texting Arthur. She is doing it, I typed. The confession is live. Record it, save it, and tell Sterling we will be there at noon. I looked at Tiffany, wiping her eyes for the camera. Keep acting, sweetheart, I thought. Enjoy your performance. Because tomorrow the curtain falls. And when it does, you won't be bowing. You will be buried. She finished the stream. She turned off the light. She looked at me. Happy, she snapped. Very, I said. Good. Be ready at 11 tomorrow. Wear a suit. I walked back to my room. I packed a small bag, not for the meeting, but for afterward. Because after tomorrow I wouldn't be coming back to this house, and neither would they. I lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes. I pictured Ruby in the hotel room surrounded by white roses. Hold on, Ruby, I whispered into the darkness. Just one more day. The check is coming due, and I am going to collect every single cent. The morning of the signing ceremony arrived with a frenetic energy that made the very air in my house feel thin and brittle. Tiffany had been up since 4 a.m, barking orders at a team of caterers she had hired on credit. My living room was no longer a home, it was a stage set. The furniture had been rearranged to create what she called a power dynamic aesthetic. There were velvet ropes blocking off the hallway. There were towering floral arrangements that smelled too sweet, like a funeral for dignity. I woke up early, but I didn't get out of bed immediately. I lay there listening to the chaos outside my door. I heard the click of high heels on the hardwood. I heard Jamal dragging chairs. I heard the artificial laughter of people who were already performing for an invisible audience. Today was the day they thought they would win everything. Today was the day I would ensure they lost it all. I turned to Ruby. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. She was still wearing the cheap synthetic wig I had bought her on the wedding day. It was tangled now, and it sat heavy on her head, a constant reminder of her humiliation. "Get dressed, Ruby," I said softly. "We are going out." She looked at me with fear in her eyes. "Out, Caleb. Tiffany said we have to stay here until the broadcast starts. She said she needs to approve our outfits." "Tiffany doesn't command this ship," I said, standing up. "I do. Pack a bag, Ruby. Your best dress. Your pearls. The shoes you wore to the governor's ball 10 years ago." "But Caleb," she whispered. "Trust me," I said. "Today isn't about surviving. It is about resurrection." We slipped out the back door while Tiffany was screaming at a florist about the shade of the hydrangeas. We got into my old sedan and drove away from the madness. But we didn't go far. My first stop wasn't the spa. It was a nondescript office building on the outskirts of Decatur. A place with barred windows and a sign that simply read, "Apex Capital." "Stay in the car, Ruby," I said. "I have a business transaction to handle." I walked into the office. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. A man sat behind a metal desk. He was thick-necked, wearing a gold chain that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. This was Vance the shark who held the note on my house. "Can I help you, Pop?" Vance grunted, not looking up from his racing form. "I am Caleb Johnson," I said. "You hold the mortgage on 452 Oakwood Drive." Vance looked up then. Up. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Ah, the father. I heard about you. Your boy is in deep water, old-timer. We are starting foreclosure proceedings on Monday, unless you are here to beg for more time, which I don't give." "I am not here to beg," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a cashier's check. I drew it this morning from my private account, the one Jamal didn't know existed. I placed the check on the desk. It was for $315,000. The principal plus the exorbitant interest plus the penalties. "I am here to buy the debt," I said. Vance looked at the check. He looked at the amount. He looked at me. His eyes narrowed. "This is a certified check," he said, suspicious. "Call the bank," I said. "It is good." He picked up the phone. He made the call. As he listened, his expression changed from suspicion to respect. He hung up. "Well then, Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice changing completely. "It seems you are a man of resources. Why didn't your son say you had this kind of liquid cash?" "Because my son is a fool," I said. "Transfer the lien, Vance. Assign the mortgage to me. I want the deed in my hand. Today." "Why?" Vance asked, printing out the documents. "If you pay it off, the house is free and clear. Why do you want to hold the note?" "Because I said, signing the papers with a flourish. I want to be the one who decides when to foreclose." I walked out of that office 10 minutes later with the legal power to evict my son and his wife at a moment's notice. I was no longer just their father. I was their creditor. And unlike Vance, I had personal reasons to call in the loan. I got back into the car. Ruby was wringing her hands. "Is everything okay, Caleb?" she asked. "Everything is perfect," I said. "Now let's go get your crown back." I drove us to Buckhead, to the most exclusive salon in the city. I had called ahead. The owner was an old friend of mine, a woman who knew that service meant silence and discretion. We walked in and they were waiting for us. They took Ruby to a private suite. I spoke to the stylist, a true artist in her field. "I don't want her to look like she is hiding," I told the stylist. Tiffany shaved her head to shame her. "I want you to make her look like a warrior queen. I want a wig that looks like her natural hair, but better. Silver, shining, regal. And I want her skin to glow. I want her to look like she owns the building." I waited in the lobby, drinking espresso while they worked on my wife. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of massages, facials, and artistry. When the door opened and Ruby walked out, I stopped breathing. She was magnificent. They had fitted her with a custom silver unit that looked so natural it was breathtaking. It was styled in a chic, sharp bob that framed her face perfectly. Her skin, which had been gray and drawn from the poison, looked luminous. She was wearing a cream-colored silk suit we had bought on the way over. She stood tall. "The slump was gone, Caleb," she whispered, touching her hair. "Do I look okay?" "You look dangerous," I said, standing up and taking her hand. "You look like the woman I fell in love with 50 years ago, but sharper." We drove back to the house in silence, but the energy in the car had shifted. Ruby wasn't wringing her hands anymore. She was looking out the window, watching the city pass by with a new steely resolve. We parked down the street so we could walk in. I needed to assess the battlefield. The driveway was full of cars. There were news vans. There were luxury cars belonging to local influencers. I saw a few TikTokers I recognized from Tiffany's feed setting up ring lights on my lawn. We slipped in through the side gate. I told Ruby to go straight to the guest room and wait. "Don't let anyone see you," I said. "Not until it is time. Keep the door locked." I walked into the kitchen. It was chaos. Tiffany was screaming at Jamal because the ice sculpture wasn't melting fast enough, or something equally ridiculous. "Where have you been?" she shrieked when she saw me. She looked frantic. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were wild. "We go live in an hour. The representatives from CJ Ventures will be here at noon." "Where is Ruby?" "She is resting," I said, keeping my voice low and submissive. "She's not feeling well, Tiffany." The detox. It took a lot out of her. "God, she is so dramatic," Tiffany groaned, rolling her eyes. "Fine, as long as she is ready for the signing. But you, we need to talk about your look." She looked me up and down. I was wearing my good suit, the one I had put on for the salon. It was a navy blue Italian wool, perfectly tailored. It made me look like exactly what I was, a retired CEO. No, no, no," Tiffany said, shaking her head. "This is all wrong. You look too put together. You look rich." "I am wearing my Sunday best," I said innocently, "for the big meeting." "Take it off," she ordered. "Go put on that old gray cardigan, the one with the hole in the elbow, and those brown corduroys that are too short for you." "Why?" I asked. "Because of the narrative, Caleb," she explained, speaking to me like I was a slow child. "Our brand is that Jamal and I are the young, successful entrepreneurs taking care of his aging, humble parents. You need to look needy. You need to look like without us, you would be destitute. It makes us look like heroes." "Heroes," I repeated. "Yes, heroes," she said, checking her reflection in the microwave door. "And listen carefully. When the live stream starts, I am going to bring you out. I am going to ask you about the hair prank." I stiffened. "And you are going to say," she paused, pointing a manicured finger at my chest, "you are going to say that you were overreacting. You are going to say that you realized it was just a joke and that you forgave me because I am such a kind and generous daughter-in-law who does everything for this family." Got it. I looked at her. I looked at the utter lack of conscience in her eyes. She didn't just want my money. She wanted my soul. She wanted me to publicly validate her abuse. "I got it," I said. "Good," she smirked. "Now go change. You look too dignified. It ruins the vibe." I walked away from her. I went into the guest room where Ruby was waiting. She was sitting in the dark so no one would see her glow. "She wants me to wear rags, Ruby," I said, closing the door. "She wants me to tell the world she is a saint." Ruby stood up. In the dim light, her silver hair shone like a halo. "What are you going to do, Caleb?" she asked. I took off my jacket. I unbuttoned my shirt. "I am going to give her exactly what she asked for," I said. "I am going to put on the rags. I am going to play the part of the poor, beaten-down old man one last time." I changed into the moth-eaten sweater. I put on the old slippers. I looked in the mirror. I looked pathetic. I looked harmless. But under the sweater, in the inside pocket of my shirt, I placed the deed to the house. The deed that now had my name on it as the lien holder. And in my pocket I placed the remote control for the television screen that Tiffany had set up for her presentation. I turned to Ruby. "When I call you," I said, "I want you to walk out there. And I want you to walk like you are walking down a runway." "I will be ready," she said. I opened the door. The noise of the party washed over me. The bass of the music, the chatter of the guests, the false excitement. I shuffled out into the hallway. Jamal was there adjusting his tie. He saw me in my old clothes. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, "for playing along. I know it is hard. But this money, it will fix everything." "It will certainly fix something," I said, patting his shoulder. I walked into the living room. The lights were blinding. The cameras were rolling. Tiffany was center stage holding a microphone looking like a televangelist of greed. "Welcome everyone," she shouted to the room and to the lens. "Welcome to the beginning of the Johnson Empire." I stood in the shadows waiting for my cue. "Enjoy the spotlight, Tiffany," I thought, because in about 10 minutes I am going to turn off the power, and when the lights come back on, everyone is going to see the monster standing in the dark. The house that I built with my own hands was no longer a home, it was a carnival of greed. By 11:30, the living room was packed so tight with bodies that the air conditioner could not keep up. The air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume, expensive catering, and the sweaty desperation of people who would sell their own souls for a blue checkmark next to their name. Tiffany had invited everyone. There were local news reporters she had charmed, there were other influencers with tripods set up in the corners, and there were people I did not even know, hangers-on who smelled money and circled like vultures waiting for a carcass. I stood in the corner near the kitchen door, wearing the moth-eaten gray cardigan Tiffany had forced me into. My corduroy trousers were too short, exposing my ankles, and I wore a pair of worn-out slippers that shuffled when I walked. To the guests, I looked like a prop. I was part of the set dressing, just a senile old man who came with the house. I watched them look right through me. A young woman with bright pink hair almost knocked me over with her oversized handbag and didn't even apologize. She just glanced at my clothes, wrinkled her nose, and turned back to her phone to continue live streaming. Tiffany was in the center of the room holding court. She was wearing a white dress that looked more appropriate for a red carpet than a living room. She held a microphone in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. She was manic. Her eyes were wide and bright, and she was talking a mile a minute to the camera crew she had hired. "Today is the day, guys," she shouted, her voice amplified by speakers set up in the corners of the room. "Today the Johnson family goes global. We are signing a $5 million deal. Can you believe it? $5 million. We started from nothing, just love and authentic content, and now look at us." The crowd cheered. They clapped. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the woman celebrating was technically homeless, that her husband was a criminal who had forged his father's signature, or that the old man standing in the corner owned every single brick they were standing on. I took a sip of lukewarm water from a paper cup. I was calm. It was the calm of a sniper waiting for the target to walk into the crosshairs. I watched Jamal weaving through the crowd. He wasn't celebrating. He was sweating. He looked like a man walking to the gallows who hoped the rope might break. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds. He was looking at the front door. He was looking at me. Eventually, he made his way over to my corner. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and clammy. He pulled me further into the shadows, away from the cameras. "Dad, we need to talk," he hissed. I looked at him, blinking slowly, playing the part of the confused old man. "What is it, son? Is it time for lunch?" "I am hungry." "Forget lunch," Jamal snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The deed, the transfer papers. You haven't signed them yet." "Oh, those," I said, patting my pocket. "I have them right here." "Give them to me," Jamal said, holding out his hand. His fingers were trembling. "I need to sign them as a witness and have them ready. When the investors get here, they need to see that the house is legally in my name. It is part of the deal, Dad. Remember." I looked at his hand. I looked at his face. This was my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had taught to be a man of his word. And here he was, shaking like a leaf, trying to hustle his own father out of his last possession so he could impress strangers. "I don't think I should sign them now, Jamal," I said slowly. "What?" Why? Jamal's eyes widened in panic. "Dad, don't do this to me. Not now. They will be here any minute. If we don't have the house, the deal falls through. We lose everything." "I know," I said. "But Tiffany said this is a show, right? She said we need drama. She said we need a narrative." "What are you talking about?" Jamal whispered, looking over his shoulder to make sure Tiffany wasn't watching. "I think it would be better if I signed them on stage," I said. I smiled a slow, vacuous smile. "Think about it, son. The cameras are rolling. The investors are watching. I walk out there, the loving father giving his legacy to his son. I sign the papers in front of everyone. The ultimate gift. Isn't that what Tiffany wants? Good content." Jamal stopped. He processed the idea. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was terrified, but he was also greedy. He imagined the moment, the applause, the comments. "You will do that," he asked. "You will sign them in front of everyone. No hesitation." "No hesitation," I promised. I want the world to see what I am doing for you, Jamal. I want everyone to know exactly what this family is about." Jamal let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He clapped me on the shoulder hard. "That is actually a great idea, Dad. Tiffany will love it. It is emotional. It is powerful. Okay, keep the papers in your pocket. When Tiffany calls you up, you come out and you sign." "I will be ready," I said. He walked away, a bounce returning to his step. He thought he had won. He thought he had manipulated the old man one last time. He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and downed it in one gulp. I reached into my pocket and touched the papers. They were indeed transfer papers. But they weren't the ones Jamal had printed out from LegalZoom. They were the foreclosure documents I had prepared with Arthur. They were the eviction notice. I looked around the room. I saw a group of young men laughing near the fireplace. One of them put his drink down on the mantelpiece right on top of a framed photo of Ruby and me from our 40th anniversary. The condensation from the glass was ruining the frame. I wanted to go over there and knock it off. I wanted to scream. But I stayed still. Let them disrespect the house. Let them treat it like a frat house. It only justified what was coming. Tiffany was back on the microphone. "Okay, everyone," she yelled. "They are almost here. I want energy. I want excitement. When they walk through that door, I want you to make them feel like they just walked into the Oscars. This is the moment that changes our lives." She looked over at me. She caught my eye. She made a gesture with her hand, pretending to zip her lips, and then gave me a thumbs up. She was reminding me of my script, reminding me to be the submissive, apologizing father-in-law. I nodded at her. I gave her a thumbs up back. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a long, authoritative chime that cut through the noise of the party. Silence fell over the room instantly. The music was cut. The chatter stopped. Every head turned toward the heavy oak front door. Tiffany took a deep breath. She smoothed her dress. She checked her reflection in her phone one last time. "Showtime," she whispered. Jamal walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. He looked back at Tiffany. She nodded. He opened the door. Standing there, framed by the midday sun, were three people. Mr. Sterling led the group. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit that cost more than Jamal's car. Behind him were two associates carrying briefcases. They looked like sharks in human skin. They looked like money. "Mr. Johnson Sterling," said his voice deep and resonating. "I believe we have an appointment." "We do," Jamal stammered, stepping back to let them in. "Please, come in. Welcome to our home." The crowd erupted. Tiffany had timed it perfectly. As they stepped across the threshold, people cheered. Cameras flashed. Phones were held high, recording every second. Tiffany rushed forward, her arms outstretched. "Mr. Sterling," she gushed. "Welcome. We are so honored." Sterling didn't smile. He walked into the room like he owned it. He looked at the crowd with a mixture of amusement and disdain. He looked at the velvet ropes. He looked at the ring lights. "Quite a reception," Mrs. Johnson Sterling said. "You certainly know how to draw a crowd." "We are all about community," Tiffany said, beaming. "We wanted our fans to share in this moment." Sterling nodded. He walked to the center of the room where a table had been set up for the signing. He placed his briefcase on the table. The sound of the latches clicking open was loud in the sudden silence. I watched from my corner. I saw the greed on Tiffany's face. I saw the relief on Jamal's face. They thought the finish line was right there. They thought they were crossing into the promised land. Sterling opened the briefcase. He pulled out a single thick document bound in blue leather. "Shall we proceed?" Sterling asked. "We have a tight schedule." "Yes," Tiffany said. She grabbed the microphone again. "Okay, everyone. This is it. The moment we have all been waiting for." She looked at me. Her eyes were hard. But first she said into the mic, her voice taking on a sweet, sickening tone. "Before we sign the future, we need to honor the past. I want to invite my father-in-law, Caleb, up to the stage." The crowd turned to look at me. The cameras swung in my direction. I stood there in my holy sweater and my too short pants. I looked small. I looked weak. "Come on up, Pops," Tiffany said, beckoning me. "Don't be shy." I took a step forward. I shuffled my feet. I hunched my shoulders. "I am coming," I said, my voice cracking just enough. I walked through the crowd. People parted for me, but not out of respect. They parted because they didn't want to touch the old man in the rags. I walked up to the table. I stood between Tiffany and Jamal. I looked at Sterling. He didn't blink. He knew the plan. He was the only other actor on this stage who knew the ending of the play. Hi, everyone, I said into the microphone. Tiffany shoved in my face. I reached into my pocket. I felt the papers. I felt the remote control. It is time to sign, Jamal whispered in my ear. Yes, I said, looking out at the sea of faces, looking into the lenses of 100 cameras. Yes, it is. I pulled the papers out of my pocket. I placed them on the table next to the $5 million contract. But before I sign, I said, my voice suddenly losing its tremor, my posture straightening just a fraction. I think we should watch a video, a retrospective, to show everyone how we got here. Tiffany looked confused. A video, she whispered off mic. We didn't plan a video. I know, I said, smiling at her. It is a surprise, a gift. I pointed the remote at the massive flat-screen TV behind us. Hit it, I said, and I pressed the button. The bass from the speakers was thumping so hard it felt like it was rattling the expensive crystal glasses on the tables. The living room of the mansion had been transformed into a stage. Bright ring lights were positioned in every corner, and a massive projector screen displayed Tiffany's social media handle in gold letters. She was in her element. Wearing a shimmering red dress that cost more than Jamal made in a month, she held her phone up high, broadcasting to the world. Her voice was shrill with excitement, piercing through the music. Guys, we did it, she screamed into the camera lens, her smile so wide it looked painful. We are literally moments away from signing the biggest deal of my life. $5 million, can you believe it? $5 million from CJ Ventures is about to change everything. I told you all that hard work pays off. I told you that if you manifest it, the universe delivers. She spun around, capturing the crowd of friends and hangers on who were drinking her expensive champagne and eating the catering she had put on credit cards. In the corner, Jamal stood watching his wife. He looked nauseous. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He knew the truth about their finances. He knew the bank had called 3 times that morning. He knew this investment was their only lifeboat. He spotted his father Caleb standing near the kitchen entrance. Caleb looked out of place in his simple gray sweater and worn-out slacks. He looked like a servant in his own home. Jamal rushed over, gripping his father's arm a little too tightly. Dad, listen to me, Jamal hissed, looking over his shoulder to make sure Tiffany wasn't watching. When you get up there, just smile and nod. Don't say anything weird, and for God's sake, sign the house transfer papers I gave you. The investors need to see stability. They need to see assets. Do this for me, Dad. Please. Caleb looked down at his son's hand, gripping his arm. Then he looked up into Jamal's eyes. There was no fear in Caleb's gaze today. There was no confusion. There was a calmness that Jamal had not seen in years. It was the kind of calm the ocean has right before a hurricane hits land. I will do exactly what needs to be done, son, Caleb said softly. Jamal exhaled, thinking he had won. He patted his father's shoulder and pushed him toward the stage as Tiffany's voice boomed over the microphone. And now, everyone, the moment you have been waiting for. I want to introduce you to the patriarch of this family, the man who is so lucky to be supported by us in his old age. My father-in-law, Caleb. Come on up here, Dad. The crowd clapped politely. On the live stream, 50,000 people were watching. Comments were scrolling up the screen at lightning speed. Tiffany grabbed Caleb's hand and pulled him into the harsh glare of the ring lights. She draped an arm around him, treating him like a prop. Isn't he cute, guys? She said to her phone. We take such good care of him. Now we have a special representative from CJ Ventures here today to finalize the partnership. But first, I want my dad to say a few words about how proud he is of his successful daughter-in-law. Here, Dad, say hi to the internet. She shoved the microphone into Caleb's hand. She expected him to stutter. She expected him to mumble something about being grateful. She smirked at the camera, ready to cut him off if he took too long. Caleb held the microphone. He didn't shake. He didn't look at the camera. He looked at Tiffany. Then he looked at Jamal, standing nervously in the front row. Finally, he looked out at the room full of strangers drinking his wine in his house. He raised the microphone to his lips. The feedback whined for a split second, silencing the room. Good evening, everyone, Caleb said. His voice was not the weak rasp of an old man. It was deep, resonant, and commanding. It was a voice used to boardrooms and negotiations. My name is Caleb Johnson, he continued. Tiffany rolled her eyes slightly, urging him to hurry up. And I am the founder and chairman of CJ Ventures. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Tiffany's smile froze. It didn't fade, it just stuck there like a glitch in a video. She blinked once, then twice, trying to process the words. What she whispered, the microphone catching her confusion. Jamal dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the quiet room. Red wine splashed onto his shoes, but he didn't move. He stared at his father as if seeing a ghost. I said. Caleb repeated, his voice harder, now projecting authority that made people instinctively straighten up. I am CJ Ventures. The C stands for Caleb. The J stands for Johnson. The company you have been begging for money, Tiffany. The company you have been harassing with emails for 6 months. It belongs to me. The live stream chat went berserk. On the phone screen, which was still facing the crowd, thousands of comments flew by. Did he say he owns the company? Oh my God, look at her face. Is this a prank? No way, that old man is a billionaire. Tiffany laughed nervously, a high-pitched, frantic sound. Dad, stop joking. You are confusing everyone. He is a little senile, guys, she said to the camera, desperation creeping into her eyes. He used to be a janitor. He is confused. I am not confused, Caleb said, cutting her off. And I am not a janitor. I retired 10 years ago, but I kept my position as chairman of the board. I built that company from the ground up with my own 2 hands while you were still learning how to lie to your parents. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black remote. You wanted a presentation, Tiffany, Caleb said. You wanted to show the world the truth about our family. Let's show them. He pressed a button. The giant projector screen behind them flickered. Tiffany's logo disappeared. In its place, a video file began to play. It was shaky footage clearly recorded from a hidden camera. It showed Tiffany sitting at the kitchen table holding a phone to her ear. The date stamp was from 3 weeks ago. On the big screen, giant Tiffany took a sip of wine and laughed cruelly. I know Jamal is pathetic, she was saying in the video. Her voice boomed through the speakers, clear and venomous. He is soft. I can manipulate him into doing whatever I want. Once we get the old man to sign over the house, I am going to dump Jamal so fast his head will spin. I just need the deed. Then I am putting the old guy in a state home and taking half of everything Jamal has. In the room, the real Tiffany turned pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She lunged for the remote, trying to grab it from Caleb, but he simply stepped aside. Jamal stood in the center of the room, surrounded by his friends, listening to his wife call him pathetic. His hands were shaking. Tears of humiliation welled up in his eyes. But that is not all, Caleb said, his voice cold as ice. You talk about family values on your channel, Tiffany. Let's see your values in action. He clicked the button again. The video changed. This time it was the kitchen again. It showed Ruby, Caleb's granddaughter, and Tiffany's stepdaughter leaving her glass of juice on the counter. Tiffany walked into the frame. She looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a small bottle of laxatives, and emptied it into the child's juice. She stirred it with her finger, wiped it on her dress, and walked away smiling. The crowd gasped. A collective sound of shock and disgust rippled through the party. People began to back away from Tiffany as if she were contagious. The live stream comments turned into a wave of hatred. Child abuser, call the police. This woman is a monster. No, Tiffany screamed, clawing at the air. That is edited. That is a deep fake. He is lying. Turn it off. She ran toward the projector trying to pull the cords, but Caleb's security team, who had been blending in with the catering staff, stepped forward, blocking her path. Caleb turned to the camera. He looked directly into the lens, addressing the 50,000 people watching. There is no deal, he announced. CJ Ventures does not invest in fraud. We do not invest in abuse. And we certainly do not invest in people who mistreat their family. He turned to face Tiffany. She was shaking now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Please, Dad, she sobbed, changing tactics instantly. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. We can work this out. We are family. Family. Caleb repeated the word, tasting like ash in his mouth. You lost the right to use that word when you poisoned my granddaughter. You lost that right when you planned to throw me onto the street. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a contract. This is not $5 million, Caleb said, handing the paper to Jamal, who was still standing there paralyzed. Jamal looked down at the paper. His hands trembled as he read the title. It is an eviction notice, Caleb said, his voice ringing with finality. Eviction, Tiffany shrieked. You can't do that. This is our house. Actually, it is my house, Caleb corrected her. It has always been my house. I let you live here. I paid the bills you ignored. I fixed the roof you broke. But tonight that ends. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings. Anything left after 60 minutes belongs to the charity I am donating this furniture to." He looked at Jamal. His eyes softened slightly, but the steel remained. "And you, son, you have a choice. You can stay with her and face the lawsuits for fraud and child endangerment that are coming her way tomorrow. Or you can stand up like a man and walk away." The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan and Tiffany's jagged breathing. The live stream was still running, capturing every second of her downfall. The number of viewers had jumped to 100,000. Caleb placed the microphone gently on the table. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned his back on the chaos he had unleashed and walked toward the garden door, not looking back once. He had reclaimed his dignity. The rest was up to them. The silence that Caleb left behind when he walked out the garden door was heavy and suffocating. But it did not last long. Within seconds, the atmosphere in the luxury living room shifted from shock to something far more predatory. Tiffany stood center stage, freezing in her expensive red dress. Her hands were shaking so violently that she nearly dropped her phone. She frantically tapped the screen, trying to end the live stream that had just ruined her life. Her long, manicured fingernails clicked against the glass in a panic. Finally, the screen went black. She let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She looked up, expecting to see sympathy in the eyes of the people she called her best friends. She expected her squad of influencers and social climbers to rush to her side to comfort her and tell her that the old man was crazy. But that is not what happened. Instead, she saw a wall of lenses. The guests who had been drinking her champagne and eating her food were not comforting her. They were filming her. Every single person in the room had their phone raised. The red recording lights were blinking like hundreds of tiny judging eyes. These were not friends. They were content creators. And Tiffany Johnson, the queen of lifestyle vlogging, had just become the biggest content goldmine of the year. "Stop it!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Put your phones away! The party is over! Get out! Everyone get out right now!" Nobody moved. A girl in a sequined dress who Tiffany had known since college stepped closer, zooming in on Tiffany's tear-stained face. "Is it true, Tiff?" the girl asked, her voice dripping with fake concern while she live-streamed to her own followers. "Did you really poison your stepdaughter? That is wild!" "Get out!" Tiffany shrieked. She lunged at the girl, trying to slap the phone out of her hand. But before she could make contact, the heavy oak front doors of the mansion swung open with a resounding boom that shook the walls. The sound cut through the chaos instantly. 3 men walked in. They moved with a purpose that made the influencers scatter like cockroaches when the lights turn on. Leading the group was Sheriff Miller. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a face carved from granite. He was wearing his full uniform, his badge catching the light from the chandeliers. Tiffany knew him, or rather she knew of him. He was the chief of police for the entire district, but more importantly, she remembered seeing him on the golf course in photos with Caleb. They played together every Sunday. Behind him walked a man in a sharp navy blue suit carrying a leather briefcase. He had the cold, analytical eyes of a high-powered attorney. This was Mr. Henderson, Caleb's personal lawyer for 30 years, and flanking them were 2 uniformed officers, their faces grim and unsmiling. Tiffany took a step back, bumping into Jamal. Her husband was still standing there, paralyzed, looking at the floor as if he wished it would open up and swallow him whole. Sheriff Miller did not look at the guests. He did not look at Jamal. He walked straight up to Tiffany. He looked at her with a mixture of professional detachment and personal disgust. Tiffany Johnson, the sheriff, said, his voice deep and booming, filling the cavernous room. "What is this?" Tiffany stammered, trying to regain her composure. "You can't just barge in here. We are having a private event. I will sue you for trespassing." Sheriff Miller ignored her threat. He reached into his belt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not a polite letter. It was a court order. "I am not here to party, Mrs. Johnson," he said. "I am here to serve an emergency protective order and an immediate eviction notice." "Eviction?" Tiffany laughed nervously. "That is ridiculous. My father-in-law is just having a tantrum. He is old and confused. You know how old people get." "Mr. Henderson." The lawyer stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick file and laid it on the table right next to the microphone Caleb had left behind. "Mr. Johnson is of sound mind and body," Mr. Henderson said, his tone dry and cutting. "In fact, he just sent me the video evidence from this evening. The evidence of you admitting to conspiracy to commit fraud, the evidence of you admitting to elder abuse, and most disturbingly, the video of you administering a harmful substance to a minor. The room went deadly silent. The influencers were still recording, capturing every word. That video was fake. Tiffany screamed, her face turning a blotchy red. It was AI generated. You can't prove anything. We have the raw files from the security system, Mr. Henderson replied calmly. And we have the toxicology report from the hospital where Ruby was treated last week. We know exactly what you gave her. And we know exactly why you did it. Sheriff Miller took a step closer. His hand rested near his handcuffs. Based on the evidence provided, a judge has granted an emergency order removing you from the premises immediately to ensure the safety of the victims. You have 10 minutes to vacate this property. Tiffany looked around frantically. She grabbed Jamal's arm and dug her nails into his bicep. Jamal, say something, she hissed. Tell them to get out. This is your house too. Tell them they can't kick us out of our own home. Jamal looked up. His eyes were red and rimmed with dark circles. He looked at the sheriff, then at the lawyer. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Tell them, Tiffany shrieked, shaking him. You are the man of the house. Defend your wife. Jamal pulled his arm away from her. It was a small movement, but it felt monumental. Actually, Mrs. Johnson, the lawyer, interrupted again. I think this is the part where you are most confused, and it is time to correct the record. He picked up the file from the table and held up a deed. It was an old document, yellowed slightly at the edges. You have spent the last 5 years telling the world that this is your mansion. You have told your followers that your husband is a successful real estate mogul. You have built your entire brand on the idea that you own this lifestyle. Tiffany crossed her arms, trying to look defiant, but her lip was trembling. So what? She spat. Jamal inherited this house. Everyone knows that. No, Mr. Henderson said, shaking his head slowly. Jamal did not inherit anything. He turned the document so she could see the signature at the bottom. This property was placed into an irrevocable trust 20 years ago. The sole beneficiary and trustee of that trust is Caleb Johnson. Tiffany blinked. She looked at Jamal. What is he talking about, Jamal? Jamal couldn't meet her eyes. He whispered so softly that only she and the camera phones nearby could hear. Dad owns the house, Tiff. He always has. Tiffany felt the room spin. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. But you said, she stammered, you said he transferred it to you. You said he just lived in the guest wing because he was lonely. You said the money came from your investments. I lied, Jamal said, his voice breaking. I lied because you wanted a rich husband. I lied because you wouldn't have looked at me twice if you knew I was just a mid-level manager at my dad's company. The lawyer continued, twisting the knife with professional precision. Jamal does not have access to the trust. He never has. He receives a salary from CJ Ventures, a salary that he has already overdrawn by 6 months to pay for your parties and your wardrobe. Mr. Henderson pulled out another sheet of paper. In fact, as of tonight, Jamal has been terminated from his position at CJ Ventures for gross misconduct and misappropriation of company funds. Tiffany stared at her husband. She didn't see a partner. She didn't see a man she loved. She saw a fraud. She saw a wallet that was empty. She saw her golden ticket turning into dust in her hands. You are broke, she whispered. Her voice was full of horror, not because he was unemployed, but because of what it meant for her image. Technically, the lawyer corrected. He is worse than broke. He is in significant debt to the company. And since your name is on the credit cards you used to buy this party setup, you are liable for that debt as well. The reality crashed down on Tiffany like a tidal wave. The house wasn't hers. The money wasn't hers. The fame was built on a lie. And now the law was standing in her living room. Sheriff Miller checked his watch. You have 7 minutes left, Mrs. Johnson. After that, you will be removed for trespassing. And frankly, considering the charges coming your way regarding the child endangerment, I would suggest you call a criminal defense attorney instead of worrying about your clothes. Tiffany looked at the crowd. The influencers were snickering now. They were whispering to each other, typing captions that would destroy her reputation within the hour. Fake life, # broke. Tiffany exposed. She looked at the walls of the mansion she had claimed as her kingdom. It felt cold now, alien. It had never accepted her because she had never respected the man who built it. She turned to Jamal one last time. Her eyes were hard and hateful. "You useless loser," she screamed. "You ruined everything." She didn't wait for him to respond. She didn't pack a bag. She simply turned and ran. She pushed past the sheriff, pushed past the lawyer, and ran out the front door into the night. Her heels clicked frantically on the driveway as she fled from the truth she could no longer outrun. Jamal stood alone in the center of the room. The sheriff looked at him. There was no pity in the sheriff's eyes, just a weary disappointment. "You too, son," the sheriff said quietly. "Your father said everyone out. That includes you." Jamal nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He looked around the room at the remnants of the party, the half-eaten food, the spilled wine, the shattered glass. It was a perfect metaphor for his life. He walked toward the door. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he saw the taillights of Tiffany's car speeding away down the hill. She hadn't waited for him. He was alone, completely and utterly alone. And for the first time in his life, he realized that this was exactly what he deserved. Behind him inside the house, the lawyer picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It is done," Caleb Mr. Henderson said into the phone. "The house is secure. The parasites are gone." On the other end of the line, Caleb sat on a park bench overlooking the city lights. He took a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted sweet. "Thank you," Caleb said. "Change the locks and turn off the lights. I want that house to be quiet for a while." Caleb hung up the phone. He stood up and adjusted his coat. He wasn't a victim anymore. He wasn't a burden. He was Caleb Johnson, and he was just getting started. The room was silent, but it was a heavy, suffocating silence that felt louder than the music that had been blasting only 20 minutes ago. The party guests were gone. The influencers had fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving behind spilled drinks and half-eaten canapes on the expensive rugs. The only people left in the cavernous living room were the security team standing like statues by the doors, the sheriff watching with crossed arms, and the father and son standing in the ruins of their relationship. Jamal looked at the empty doorway where his wife had just disappeared. He heard the fading sound of her sports car engine, and with it the fading reality of the life he thought he had. He looked down at his Italian leather shoes, now stained with cheap wine. He looked at his hands, which were shaking uncontrollably. Then slowly and painfully, he turned to look at Caleb. His father stood near the fireplace. Caleb did not look triumphant. He did not look happy. He looked like a mountain that had weathered a storm, ancient and immovable, but eroded by the wind. His face was a mask of weary disappointment. Jamal felt his knees give way. It wasn't a choice. The weight of his failure, the terror of his debt, and the sudden realization of his solitude crushed him physically. He sank to the floor. He didn't just kneel, he collapsed. He crawled forward on the marble floor, moving toward the man he had called a burden for the last 5 years. He reached out and grabbed the hem of Caleb's trousers, burying his face in the fabric like a frightened child. "Dad," he sobbed, his voice muffled and wet with tears. "Dad, please. You have to listen to me. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she was poisoning Ruby. I didn't know she was stealing from the accounts." Caleb looked down. He didn't pull his leg away, but he didn't reach down to comfort his son either. He simply watched this display of misery with cold, detached eyes. "I was tricked," Dad, Jamal cried, looking up, his face a mess of snot and tears. "Tiffany, she is a witch. She manipulated me. She told me we needed the money for the business. She told me you were happy in the guest wing. I did it for us, Dad. I did it because I love you and Mom. Please, you can't throw me out. I have nowhere to go. I am your son." The word son hung in the air. It vibrated with a history of betrayals. Caleb took a slow, deep breath. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. For a second, Jamal thought his father was going to wipe his tears. A spark of hope lit up in his desperate eyes. But Caleb simply wiped his own hands as if he had touched something dirty, and then dropped the handkerchief onto the floor beside Jamal. "Stand up," Caleb said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a command that made the security guards straighten their backs. Jamal scrambled to his feet, wiping his face with his sleeve, trying to compose himself. He thought he saw a crack in the armor. He thought he saw forgiveness. "You say you were tricked," Caleb said, walking slowly around his son, circling him like a judge inspecting a criminal. "You say you were a victim of her manipulation, that she is the villain and you are just the innocent bystander." "Yes, Dad, exactly." Jamal nodded frantically. "She controlled everything. I was just trying to keep the peace." "Keep the peace." Caleb repeated the words, tasting them with disgust. Is that what you call it? Caleb stopped directly in front of Jamal. He leaned in close enough that Jamal could smell the old man's aftershave, a scent he hadn't noticed in years, because he never got close enough to care. Let me tell you what I remember, Jamal Caleb said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. I remember 3 years ago when your mother was in the final stages of her cancer. I remember when her hair started falling out from the chemo. She was scared, Jamal. She was a woman who had always taken pride in her appearance, and she was terrified of looking sick. Jamal flinched. He tried to look away, but Caleb grabbed his chin, forcing him to make eye contact. I remember Tiffany walking into her room, Caleb continued, his voice rising, slightly shaking with suppressed rage. I remember your wife laughing at her. I remember Tiffany saying that Mom looked like a sick dog shedding on the furniture. And then I remember Tiffany holding the razor. She said she was going to help. She said she would give Mom a trim. Tears streamed down Caleb's face now, but they were tears of fury, not sadness. She shaved your mother's head, Jamal. She didn't do it gently. She didn't do it with love. She did it roughly, leaving cuts on her scalp, laughing the whole time, live streaming it to her friends as a makeover video. She stripped your mother of her dignity in her final days. Jamal was shaking his head, trying to block out the memory. Dad, please stop. And where were you? Caleb roared, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Where were you when your wife was humiliating the woman who gave you birth? Were you tricked then? Were you manipulated then? Jamal sobbed brokenly. I was scared. I didn't want to fight. No, Caleb hissed, pushing Jamal back. You were there. You stood in the doorway and you watched. You watched your mother cry and you did nothing. You didn't stop her. You didn't slap the razor out of her hand. You didn't kick that woman out of the house. You turned around and walked away because you were more afraid of losing your wife's approval than you were of losing your mother's soul. Caleb stepped back, straightening his jacket. The fire in his eyes cooled into a block of ice. That is not being tricked, Jamal. That is cowardice, and it is greed. You stayed silent because you liked the car she bought you. You stayed silent because you liked the expensive watches and the vacations. You sold your mother's dignity for a Rolex. That is not something a man does. That is not something a son does. But Dad, Jamal whispered, his voice barely audible. I am sorry. Sorry is a word for when you spill coffee, Caleb said. Sorry does not bring back the dead, and it does not erase the fact that you are a small, weak man. You are not a victim, Jamal. You are an accomplice. And frankly, I have more respect for Tiffany. At least she knows she is a shark. You are just a leech. Caleb turned to the head of security, a large man named Marcus, who had been waiting for the signal. Marcus, Caleb said, pointing at the door. Get the bags. What bags? Jamal asked, looking confused. Everything Caleb said, every suit, every shoe, every single thing that was bought with my money or credit cards under my name. If they are wearing it, they can keep it. Everything else goes on the lawn. The security team moved with military precision. They marched up the grand staircase. Jamal tried to run after them, but Marcus stepped in his path, blocking him with a wall of muscle. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, sir, Marcus said calmly. Within minutes, the sound of chaos filled the house. Drawers were pulled open, hangers clattered, expensive designer clothes were grabbed by the armful. Outside on the manicured front lawn, the scene was even more dramatic. The security guards didn't pack suitcases. They simply walked to the balcony of the master bedroom and threw things over the railing. Thousands of dollars of custom suits, silk dresses, and handbags rained down from the sky, landing in the wet grass. It was a waterfall of excess turning into garbage. Jamal ran out the front door, watching his possessions pile up in the dirt. My collection, he screamed, running toward a pile of sneakers that were now scattered in the mud. Those are limited edition, you can't do this. Suddenly, headlights swept across the driveway. A car screeched to a halt at the front gate. Tiffany had returned. She jumped out of her car, not daring to enter the property but screaming from the other side of the iron fence. My bags, she shrieked, her face twisted with greed. You can't throw my Birkin bags on the ground. They are investments. Give them to me. She tried to push open the pedestrian gate, but Sheriff Miller was already moving. He walked down the driveway, his hand resting on his belt. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked with the heavy authority of the law. He stopped at the gate, looking at Tiffany through the bars. Mrs. Johnson, the sheriff said. I believe I told you to leave the district. I want my stuff, she yelled, pointing at the pile of clothes on the lawn. That is my property. Actually, the sheriff said, checking a clipboard he had taken from the lawyer. According to the receipts provided by the trustee, all of these items were purchased with stolen company funds. Technically, they are evidence. But Mr. Johnson has graciously decided not to press charges for the theft of the clothing if you remove yourself from his sight immediately. Tiffany looked at the pile of luxury goods soaking in the night dew. She looked at Jamal, who was on his knees in the grass trying to fold a wet suit jacket, crying hysterically. "You are pathetic," she screamed at Jamal. "Do something. Fight for us." Jamal looked up at her. His eyes were empty. There was no fight left in him. Sheriff Miller stepped closer to the bars. "If you take one step onto this property, I will arrest you for trespassing," he said. "And given the warrant that is being typed up right now regarding the child abuse charges, I suggest you get in your car and drive until you run out of gas." Tiffany looked at the sheriff, then at the dark, imposing figure of Caleb standing on the front porch. Caleb wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the stars. She let out a guttural scream of frustration, kicked the gate one last time, and ran back to her car. She peeled out, leaving rubber marks on the pavement, disappearing into the night for good. Jamal sat in the middle of the lawn, surrounded by the wet debris of his false life. He looked up at the porch. "Dad," he whispered one last time. Caleb looked down. He reached for the switch on the wall next to the door. "Goodbye, Jamal," Caleb said. He flipped the switch. The exterior floodlights went out. The house plunged into darkness, leaving Jamal alone in the shadows with nothing but the cold night air and the price of his own choices. The heavy front door clicked shut, and the sound of the lock turning echoed like a gunshot, ending the chapter forever. The internet is a living, breathing creature, and on that night it was hungry. While the lights went out in the mansion on the hill, the digital world was just waking up. Caleb's video did not just spread, it exploded. It moved across time zones, jumping from continent to continent like a wildfire fed by gasoline. The algorithm which Tiffany had worshipped like a god for her entire adult life had suddenly turned against her. It was no longer her tool. It was her executioner. Tiffany sat in the passenger seat of the luxury sports car, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of her phone screen. The car was parked in the corner of a 24-hour gas station lot. It was the only place they could think to go where nobody would recognize them. Or so they hoped. She was not crying anymore. She was hyperventilating. Her thumb scrolled frantically down the screen. Every time she refreshed the page, the numbers jumped. 1 million views. 5 million views. 10 million views. The hashtag Tiffany Exposed was the #1 trending topic in the world. It was trending higher than politics. It was trending higher than sports. She clicked on a video from a commentary channel that had just been uploaded. The host, a teenager with bright blue hair, was laughing. "So let me get this straight," the host said. She pretended to be rich while living in her father-in-law's basement. She drugged a child for views. And she got evicted on live stream. This is the greatest karma instant regret video in history. Tiffany threw her phone onto the dashboard. It hit the windshield with a dull thud. "They are lying," she screamed, her voice hoarse and broken. "They are twisting the narrative. I need to make a response video. I need to explain my side." She reached for the phone again, her hands shaking so badly she could barely type her passcode. But before she could open her camera app, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was an email. Then another. Then another. The notifications started stacking up so fast they blurred together. Subject: notice of contract termination. Subject: immediate cancellation of partnership. Subject: legal action regarding brand image. Tiffany opened the first one. It was from the skincare brand that paid her $20,000 a month. "Dear Mrs. Johnson," the email read, "in light of the disturbing footage that has surfaced regarding your conduct and the allegations of child abuse, we are severing all ties effective immediately. You are in breach of the morality clause in your contract. We will be seeking the return of all advance payments made for the upcoming campaign." "No, no, no," Tiffany whispered. She opened the next one. It was her agency. Dropped. The next one was the fashion label she was supposed to model for next week. Dropped. Even the vitamin company that sold cheap supplements dropped her. In the span of 45 minutes, the career she had spent 7 years building brick by brick was demolished. The income stream that supported their lavish lifestyle didn't just dry up, it evaporated. "Do something, Jamal," she snapped, turning to her husband. Jamal was slumped against the steering wheel, staring out into the darkness of the parking lot. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. Do what Jamal asked, his voice flat and dead. Call someone, Tiffany said. Call your dad back. Beg him. Tell him I am pregnant. Lie to him. Tell him anything. Just get us back in that house. Jamal laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He won't answer, Tiff. He blocked my number 10 minutes ago. I tried to call him while you were screaming at your phone. It went straight to voicemail. Well, we can't sleep here, Tiffany said, looking around the desolate parking lot. A group of teenagers was standing near the entrance of the convenience store, and she was terrified they would recognize her. Start the car. Let's go to the Four Seasons. Jamal didn't move. Did you hear me? Tiffany hissed. I said, let's go to the hotel. I need a bath and I need room service. Jamal turned his head slowly to look at her. In the dim light of the street lamps, his eyes looked sunken. We can't go to the Four Seasons, Tiffany. Why not, she demanded. Because I have $40 in my wallet, Jamal said, and that needs to last us for food. Use the black card, she said, rolling her eyes. The company card. Jamal pulled the black credit card out of his pocket. He held it up. I tried to buy gas 5 minutes ago while you were reading comments, Jamal said. Declined. Card reported lost or stolen. Tiffany felt a cold spike of fear in her stomach. Try the platinum one, she said. The joint account. Declined, Jamal repeated. Dad didn't just kick us out. He froze everything. Every asset, every account, every cent that was connected to the family trust is locked down. We have nothing. Tiffany stared at him. The reality of the situation finally pierced through her delusion. So where are we going to sleep? She whispered. You are sitting in it, Jamal said, leaning his head back against the seat and closing his eyes. The silence in the car was heavy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. For the first time in her life, Tiffany Johnson was going to sleep without Egyptian cotton sheets. She curled up in the leather bucket seat, which was designed for racing, not for sleeping, and pulled her coat tight around her. She picked up her phone one last time, hoping for a miracle, hoping that maybe her fans were defending her. She opened her social media app, but instead of her profile photo, instead of her carefully curated grid of luxury photos, she saw a blank white screen. User not found. She refreshed it. Account suspended. She tried her backup account. Suspended. She tried her video channel. Terminated. She had been reported by so many users simultaneously that the platforms had simply erased her digital existence. It was a digital execution. Tiffany Johnson, the influencer, no longer existed. She was just a homeless woman in a car with a husband she despised. She let out a sob that racked her entire body and dropped the phone to the floor mat. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the morning sun was rising over the garden. The air was crisp and clean. The house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. The frantic energy of the party was gone, washed away by the cleaning crew that Caleb had hired overnight. In the master bathroom, a very different transformation was taking place. Ruby sat in a chair facing the large vanity mirror. For months she had worn hats and hoodies to hide the patchy, uneven haircut Tiffany had forced upon her. She had walked with her head down, ashamed of how she looked. But today, a woman in a professional apron was standing behind her. This was not a random hairdresser. This was the stylist who cut Caleb's hair, a woman who knew how to treat people with dignity. Okay, sweetie, the stylist said softly, putting down her scissors. Open your eyes. Ruby slowly opened her eyes. She gasped. The jagged patches were gone. The stylist had cut her hair into a chic, modern pixie cut. It was short, but it was intentional. It framed her face perfectly, highlighting her big eyes and her high cheekbones. It didn't look like a punishment anymore. It looked like a fashion statement. It looked like armor. Ruby reached up and touched the back of her neck. She smiled. It was the first real smile that had reached her eyes in a long time. Caleb was standing in the doorway, watching in the reflection of the mirror. He was holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He walked over and handed one to his granddaughter. You look beautiful, Ruby, he said. You look like a warrior. Ruby spun around in the chair. Thank you, Grandpa. She took a sip of the cocoa. Then she walked over to the large bay window that overlooked the winding road leading down the hill. Something caught her eye. Far down at the bottom of the hill near the public road, she saw a flash of red. It was the sports car. It was parked on the shoulder. She could see 2 figures inside. Even from this distance, she could tell they were arguing. She could see Tiffany's arms waving frantically. She could see Jamal banging his hands on the steering wheel. Caleb walked up behind her. He saw the car too. He didn't say anything. He didn't offer to call them. He didn't offer to help. He simply waited to see what Ruby would do. Ruby watched them for a long moment. She remembered the taste of the medicine in her juice. She remembered the sound of the razor buzzing near her ear. She remembered her father looking away when she cried for help. She took a deep breath. She turned her back on the window. "Grandpa," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" Caleb smiled. He put a hand on her shoulder and guided her away from the window, away from the past and toward the kitchen. "We can have anything you want," he said. Behind them, Ruby reached out and pulled the heavy velvet curtains shut, blocking out the view of the car, blocking out the view of the parents who had failed her, and sealing the warmth of the home inside where it belonged. The sun rose over the city of Los Angeles, but it brought no warmth to the two people sitting in the cramped interior of the sports car. The windows were fogged up from their breath. The air inside smelled of stale perfume and regret. Tiffany Johnson woke up with a stiff neck and a bitter taste in her mouth. For a split second, she forgot where she was. She reached out, expecting to feel the high thread count sheets of her master bedroom. Instead, her hand hit the cold leather dashboard. The reality of her situation crashed down on her like a physical blow. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was a homeless woman in a wrinkled red dress sitting in a gas station parking lot. She turned her head to look at Jamal. He was asleep, his mouth slightly open, his head resting awkwardly against the window. Looking at him filled her with a rage so pure and hot it almost made her dizzy. He was the reason for this. He was the anchor that had dragged her to the bottom of the ocean. "Wake up," she screamed, shoving his shoulder hard. Jamal jerked awake, hitting his head on the glass. He blinked, confused and disoriented. What is it?" he stammered, rubbing his eyes. "Look at us," Tiffany hissed. "Just look at us. We are sleeping in a car like animals, and it is all your fault." "My fault?" Jamal asked, his voice rough with sleep. "How is this my fault? You are the one who poisoned Ruby. You are the one who got us evicted. I wouldn't have had to do anything if you were a real man." Tiffany shouted, her voice filling the small space. "You lied to me, Jamal. When we met, you told me you were an executive. You told me you ran the company. You let me believe you were rich." "I never said I owned the company," Jamal shot back, finding a backbone he hadn't possessed the night before. "I said I worked for my father. You assumed the rest. You saw the house and the cars and you stopped asking questions. You fell in love with the zip code, not me." "I never loved you," Tiffany spat the words out like venom. "I tolerated you. I tolerated your boring personality and your weak spine because I thought you came with a fortune. But you are nothing. You are a broke loser who couldn't even protect his wife from his senile father." "I am leaving you," she announced, suddenly reaching for the door handle. "Leaving me?" Jamal laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Go ahead. Walk." "Where are you going to go, Tiffany? You have no money, you have no friends, your credit cards are dead." "I am getting a divorce," she said, turning back to him, her eyes wild. "I am going to call a lawyer the second I find a phone charger. I am going to divorce you and I am going to leave you with all this mess. I will start over. I am young. I am beautiful. I will find a man who actually has money, not a pretender like you." Jamal looked at her. He didn't look sad. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The battery was at 4%. "You might want to read this before you run off," he said, unlocking the screen. He held the phone up to her face. It was an email from the family accountant, a man who had been managing the books for Caleb for 20 years. "What is this?" Tiffany asked, squinting at the small text. "It is a summary of our outstanding liabilities," Jamal said calmly. "You see, Tiffany, when you insisted on getting those platinum joint credit cards last year, you didn't read the fine print, did you?" "I don't read contracts," Tiffany scoffed. "That is what lawyers are for." "Well, you should have read this one," Jamal said. "It says that both cardholders are jointly and severally liable for all debts incurred on the account. That means you are responsible for the debt just as much as I am." "So what?" Tiffany rolled her eyes. "A few $1,000s for clothes. I will pay it off when I get my next brand deal." "Oh, wait, you ruined that too." "It is not a few thousand," Jamal interrupted her. He scrolled down to the bottom of the email where a number was highlighted in bold red. "We owe the bank $485,000, Jamal said. The silence in the car was absolute. Tiffany stared at the number. She blinked, trying to make the zeros disappear. "That is impossible," she whispered. "It is very possible," Jamal said. "The vacations to Dubai, the leasing on this car, the wardrobe you bought for Fashion Week, The renovation of the guest house you ordered without asking. It all adds up, Tiffany. And since we don't have the trust fund to pay it off anymore, the bank is going to come for us personally." He looked at her with a grim satisfaction. "So go ahead. Divorce me. The judge will split the assets, which are zero, and then he will split the debt. You will walk away single, homeless, and owing the bank nearly $250,000. Congratulations on your fresh start." Tiffany let out a scream of frustration. She pounded her fists on the dashboard, cracking the plastic vent. "No," she shrieked. "I refuse. I am not paying that. That is your father's money. He has to pay it. He doesn't have to do anything," Jamal said, closing his eyes again. "He cut us off, Tiffany. It is over." "No, it is not over," Tiffany said. Her eyes were darting around the car, manic and desperate. She looked like a trapped animal chewing on its own leg to escape a trap. "He can't do this to me," she muttered. "I am Tiffany Johnson. I am a star. He can't just throw me away like trash. He just needs to understand. He is confused. I need to talk to him." She grabbed the steering wheel. "Get out of the driver's seat," she ordered Jamal. "What?" Jamal asked. "Move," she screamed. She climbed over the center console, kicking Jamal with her heels, forcing him against the passenger door. She shoved him into the other seat and grabbed the wheel. Her hands were shaking, but her grip was iron. "What are you doing?" Jamal asked, bracing himself as she slammed the car into gear. "We are going back," she said, stepping on the gas. "Tiff, don't," Jamal warned. The sheriff said. "Shut up," Tiffany screamed. "The sheriff is gone. It is morning. Caleb is awake. I just need 5 minutes with him. I will cry. I will beg. I will tell him I am pregnant. I will tell him anything he wants to hear. He is an old man. He is soft. He will take us back. He has to." She peeled out of the gas station, narrowly missing a fuel pump. The car roared onto the highway, heading back up the hill toward the mansion. Tiffany drove like a maniac, weaving through traffic, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She wasn't thinking logically anymore. She was operating on pure narcissism. In her mind, she was the protagonist of the movie, and the protagonist always wins in the end. 20 minutes later, the car screeched to a halt in front of the massive iron gates of the Johnson estate. The house sat on the hill, serene and beautiful in the morning light. It looked like a fortress. Tiffany jumped out of the car. She didn't look like the elegant influencer she had been yesterday. Her hair was matted. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks. Her red dress was stained and wrinkled. She ran to the gate and grabbed the bars, shaking them with all her strength. "Dad!" she screamed. Caleb opened the gate. "It is me, Tiffany." There was no answer. The house remained silent. "Open the door," she yelled louder, her voice cracking. "I know you are in there. You can't leave us out here. We are family. I am sorry. Okay, I said I am sorry, so let me in." She reached through the bars and pressed the intercom button repeatedly. She kept her thumb on the buzzer, creating a long, annoying drone that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Inside the house, Caleb was sitting at the breakfast table. He was enjoying a cup of coffee and reading the newspaper. The sound of the buzzer was faint but audible. Ruby looked up from her pancakes. She looked worried. "Is that her?" Ruby asked. Caleb put down his paper. He folded it neatly. He took a sip of his coffee. "Yes," he said simply. "Are you going to let her in?" Ruby asked, shrinking back slightly in her chair. Caleb looked at his granddaughter. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the trauma that woman had inflicted. "Never," Caleb said. He stood up and walked to the wall phone in the kitchen. He didn't rush. He didn't look angry. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Hello, Sheriff," Caleb said calmly. "Yes, she is back. Yes, she is screaming at the gate. No, I don't want to press charges for the buzzer, but I believe the neighbors are getting upset, thank you." He hung up the phone and sat back down. "Eat your pancakes, sweetie," Caleb said to Ruby. "They are getting cold." Outside the gate, Tiffany was losing her mind. She had taken off one of her high heels and was banging it against the metal lock. Clang, clang, clang. "Let me in, you old fool," she shrieked. "I made this family famous. I put this house on the map. You owe me. You owe me everything." Jamal stayed in the car. He had locked the doors. He sat with his head in his hands, too ashamed to watch. He saw the neighbors coming out onto their balconies, looking down at the crazy woman screaming at the gate. He saw them holding up their phones, recording the spectacle. Tiffany didn't care. She was beyond shame. She was fighting for her survival. Suddenly, the sound of a siren cut through the air. It wasn't the polite chirp of a warning siren. It was the loud, aggressive wail of law enforcement. A police cruiser turned the corner, followed by another one. They pulled up right behind Tiffany's sports car, blocking it in. Two officers stepped out. One was Sheriff Miller. The other was a younger deputy. Tiffany stopped banging on the gate. She turned around, breathless, wild-eyed, still holding her shoe like a weapon. "Thank God you are here," she panted, trying to smooth her hair but only making it worse. "Officer, you have to help me. My father-in-law has locked me out of my own house. He is having a medical episode. You need to force the gate open." Sheriff Miller didn't smile. He didn't look amused. He walked up to her, his hand resting on his taser. Mrs. Johnson dropped the shoe he ordered. "What?" Tiffany asked, looking at the heel in her hand. "Drop it now, or I will consider it a weapon," the sheriff said, his voice hard. Tiffany dropped the shoe. It clattered on the pavement. "You are making a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I am the victim here." "Mrs. Johnson, turn around and put your hands behind your back," Sheriff Miller said, pulling out his handcuffs. "Are you arresting me?" she shrieked. "For what?" "For trying to go home. I am arresting you for disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct, and criminal trespassing." The sheriff listed the charges as he spun her around. "And I am executing the warrant for child endangerment that was signed by the judge 10 minutes ago." He clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound was metallic and final. "You have the right to remain silent," the sheriff recited as he marched her toward the cruiser. "No," Tiffany screamed, struggling against his grip. "Caleb, help me. Jamal, do something. Don't let them take me. I am famous. You can't arrest me. I have followers." She was still screaming as the sheriff pushed her into the back seat of the police car. The neighbors watched in silence. The phones recorded everything. Jamal watched from the front seat of his car. He saw his wife, the woman who had dominated his life for 5 years, being caged like the criminal she was. He didn't feel anger anymore. He just felt a profound emptiness. The sheriff tapped on Jamal's window. Jamal rolled it down. "You can't stay here, son," the sheriff said. "The tow truck is coming for this car. The leasing company reported it." Jamal nodded. He opened the door and stepped out. He didn't have a bag. He didn't have a jacket. He just had the clothes on his back and $40 in his pocket. "Where should I go?" Jamal asked, looking at the sheriff. "I don't know," the sheriff said, looking up at the house on the hill where the curtains were drawn tight. "But you can't go up there." The police car drove away with Tiffany wailing in the back seat. The tow truck arrived 5 minutes later and hauled the sports car away. Jamal stood alone on the sidewalk. He looked up at the bedroom window one last time. He thought he saw the curtain move just a fraction of an inch. He raised his hand in a small wave. The curtain fell back into place. Nobody waved back. Jamal turned around and started walking down the long, winding hill toward the city below. It was a long walk. But for the first time in his life, he was walking on his own 2 feet. 3 months is not a long time in the grand scheme of the universe. It is just a single season. It is the time it takes for a leaf to turn from green to gold and fall to the ground. But for Jamal Johnson, the last 90 days had felt like a lifetime. The Los Angeles sun was beating down on the asphalt of the Sunset Car Wash. It was 90 degrees and the air smelled of hot tar and lemon-scented soap. Jamal was wearing a pair of blue coveralls that were 2 sizes too big for him. His name was stitched onto the chest pocket in red thread, but the embroidery was fraying. He knelt on the wet concrete, scrubbing the chrome rim of a Mercedes SUV. His hands, once manicured and soft from days spent holding nothing heavier than a wine glass, were now rough. They were covered in small cuts and calluses. His fingernails were permanently stained with grease. "Hey, buddy, you missed a spot." Jamal looked up. The owner of the car, a young man in a sharp suit who looked exactly like Jamal used to look, was pointing at a smudge of dirt on the fender. He was holding a coffee cup and looking at his phone, barely acknowledging Jamal's existence. "Sorry, sir," Jamal said. His voice was quiet. He didn't argue. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" Because he knew exactly who he was. He was an employee earning minimum wage plus tips. He dipped his sponge into the bucket of soapy water and scrubbed the spot. The cold water stung his cracked skin. When he was finished, the man tossed a $5 bill at him. It fluttered to the wet ground. Jamal didn't get angry. He bent down and picked it up. He carefully dried it off and put it in his pocket. That $5 bill meant more to him than the monthly allowance of $8,000 he used to receive from his father. This money was real. It was exchanged for sweat. It was the first honest money he had earned in a decade. Every cent he made went into an envelope. Half went to a cheap studio apartment he was renting in the valley. The other half went to the bank. He had a debt of nearly $500,000 to pay off. At this rate, it would take him 40 years. But as Jamal watched the Mercedes drive away, he felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't pride exactly, but it was the absence of shame. He was tired, but he was clean. Across town, in a very different setting, Tiffany Johnson was learning a similar lesson, but she was refusing to learn it. She was standing on the side of the 405 freeway wearing a neon orange safety vest over a gray jumpsuit. She was holding a trash picker and a heavy plastic bag. "Move it along, ladies," the supervisor yelled, blowing a whistle. "We have 2 more miles to clear before lunch." Tiffany jabbed her stick at a crushed soda can. She missed. She jabbed again, aggressively stabbing the trash as if it were her enemy. She wasn't in prison, but she was close. The investigation into her finances had opened a Pandora's box. It turned out Caleb wasn't her only victim. The police had uncovered a history of small-time scams. She had tricked an elderly neighbor out of her jewelry. She had faked a charity drive and kept the proceeds. Because she had no prior criminal record, the judge had shown mercy. Or perhaps it was a different kind of punishment. He gave her 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. She was no longer Tiffany the star. She was Tiffany the cautionary tale. A car slowed down as it passed the work crew. A passenger rolled down the window. "Hey, isn't that the evil stepmom?" the passenger yelled, laughing. "Hey, Tiffany, where's your Birkin bag now?" Tiffany turned her back, pulling her cap down low over her face. Tears of humiliation burned her eyes. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them she was still better than them, but she couldn't. Her probation officer had made it very clear that one more public outburst, one more scene would violate her terms and send her straight to county jail. So she swallowed her poison. She picked up the soda can and dropped it into the bag. The silence of her digital life was deafening. Her accounts were gone. Her followers had moved on to the next drama. She was alone with the garbage, and for the first time she realized that she fit right in. While the ruins of the past were being scrubbed clean by labor and law, something beautiful was blooming on the hill. The mansion was quiet. The constant thumping bass of parties was gone. The ring lights and cameras were packed away. In their place was the sound of a shutter clicking. Click, click, click. Caleb stood in the rose garden. He was holding an old Leica film camera, a heavy mechanical masterpiece from the 1960s. He wasn't rushing. He was taking his time, focusing the lens manually, adjusting the aperture with the precision of a man who appreciates the process. "Sit up a little straighter, my dear," Caleb said softly. "Chin up. Let the light hit your eyes." Ruby sat on the stone bench. She wasn't wearing a hoodie to hide herself anymore. She was wearing a vintage silk scarf wrapped around her short pixie cut and a simple, elegant trench coat that Caleb had found in his late wife's wardrobe. She didn't look like a child, and she didn't look like a victim. She looked like a timeless icon. She looked like a movie star from an era when dignity mattered more than likes. Caleb pressed the shutter. The mechanical sound was satisfyingly tactile. He had started posting the photos on a new anonymous blog. He called it The Quiet Life. He didn't use hashtags. He didn't beg for subscribers. He just posted the black and white images of Ruby and the garden accompanied by short thoughts on resilience and class. The internet, which usually craved noise and chaos, had reacted in a surprising way. They fell in love with the silence. People were sharing the photos not as gossip, but as art. They called Ruby the symbol of old soul elegance. They praised the photos for their authenticity. Without trying to be famous, Ruby had become a muse. She represented the victory of substance over style. "I think we have enough," Caleb said, lowering the camera. "The light is changing." Ruby stood up and walked over to her grandfather. She took his arm. "You are getting really good at this, Grandpa," she said, smiling. "I have a beautiful subject," Caleb replied, patting her hand. They walked slowly back to the house. They walked past the spot where the party tent used to be, which was now a bed of wildflowers. They walked past the driveway where the sports cars used to rev their engines, which was now empty except for Caleb's reliable old sedan. They sat down on the front porch. A pot of Earl Grey tea was waiting for them on a small iron table. Caleb poured 2 cups. The steam rose up in the cool evening air. Grandpa Ruby said, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance below, "Do you miss them?" Caleb took a sip of his tea. He thought about the question. He thought about his son scrubbing cars in the valley. He thought about the woman picking up trash on the highway. I miss who I wanted them to be, Caleb said honestly. I miss the potential they had. But I do not miss the noise, Ruby. I do not miss the feeling of being a guest in my own home. He looked at his granddaughter. He saw the strength in her eyes, a strength that had been forged in the fire of the last few months. We built something new here, Caleb said. We built a home based on truth, and that is worth more than all the investments in the world. Ruby nodded. She picked up her cup. To the quiet life, she said, raising her tea in a toast. To the quiet life, Caleb agreed. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. There was no applause. There were no comments scrolling on a screen. There was just the chirping of crickets and the gentle clinking of china cups. And for the first time in a long time, the house on the hill was not a stage. It was a sanctuary. The candles on the chocolate cake flickered in the soft evening breeze. It was a simple cake, homemade by Ruby, with vanilla frosting that was not perfectly smooth. There were no sparklers. There was no professional photographer circling the table, trying to get the perfect angle for social media. There were no hashtags written in icing. It was just a cake sitting on a wooden table in the garden, surrounded by the smell of blooming jasmine and the people who actually mattered. It was Caleb's 70th birthday. A year ago, this day would have been a production. Tiffany would have rented a venue that cost more than a car. She would have forced Caleb to wear a tuxedo he hated. She would have invited 300 people he did not know, and she would have spent the entire night live streaming herself singing happy birthday, while he stood awkwardly in the background like a prop. But tonight, the garden was quiet. The only guests were Sheriff Miller, who was currently laughing at a joke Ruby had made, and Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, who had finally taken off his tie and relaxed with a glass of wine. And of course, Ruby. Ruby looked radiant. Her hair had grown out slightly into a soft, elegant style that framed her face. She was wearing a simple yellow dress that caught the last light of the sun. She looked happy. Not the performed happiness of the internet, but the deep, quiet contentment of a child who finally feels safe in her own home. The doorbell rang. The sound was unexpected. Everyone froze for a second. The trauma of the past few months was still there, buried under the surface. They all remembered the screaming at the gate. They all remembered the police sirens and the cameras. "I will get it," Ruby said, standing up. She walked to the front door, her footsteps light on the pavement. She returned a moment later, holding a small white envelope. "There is no return address," she said, handing it to her grandfather, "but I think we know who it is from." Caleb took the envelope. His hands were steady. He recognized the handwriting immediately. It was shaky and smaller than he remembered, but the loops of the letters were unmistakable. It was Jamal. Caleb opened the envelope. Inside there was a cheap drugstore card. It had a generic picture of a sailboat on the front. Inside there was no money. There was no request for a loan. There was just a short handwritten note. "Happy birthday, Dad. I am working a double shift at the car wash today, so I cannot be there. Not that I would deserve to be there anyway. I just wanted you to know that I paid off the first $5,000 of the debt to the bank this month. I did it on my own. I hope you have a good day. I miss Mom. Love, Jamal." Caleb read the note twice. He ran his thumb over the ink, feeling the indentation of the pen. "Is he okay?" Ruby asked softly, looking at the card. "He is alive," Caleb said, closing the card and placing it on the table next to the cake. "And for the first time in his life, he is actually living. That is the best birthday gift he could give me." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He reached under his chair and pulled out a leather portfolio. "Since we are talking about gifts, Caleb," he said, "I have the documents you asked for. They are finalized and ready for your signature." Caleb nodded. He stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The small chiming sound silenced the table. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was strong, resonating in the quiet garden. "Before we cut the cake, I have an announcement to make." He looked at Ruby. She smiled back encouragingly, holding his hand. "We all know what happened in this house," Caleb continued. "We know the darkness that lived here. We saw how arrogance and greed tried to destroy this family. But I have always believed that you cannot just remove darkness. You have to replace it with light." He picked up the document Mr. Henderson had given him. "Tonight I am officially launching the Ruby's Crown Foundation." Ruby's eyes widened. She had not known the name. She looked at her grandfather in surprise. "This is a scholarship fund," Caleb explained, looking at his granddaughter with pride. It is fully funded with $5 million from the family trust. It is specifically designed for young African American women who want to study law, but not just any law. The scholarship is for those who pledge to dedicate their careers to elder law and the protection of vulnerable seniors from financial and emotional abuse. Ruby covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You see," Caleb said, his voice thickening with emotion, "they tried to take your dignity, Ruby. They tried to shave your head to shame you. They tried to make you feel small. But a queen does not bow her head. She wears her crown. And now this foundation will ensure that thousands of other grandmothers and grandfathers are protected by brilliant young women who will fight for them just like we fought for each other." The sheriff clapped loudly, his eyes shining. Mr. Henderson raised his glass. Ruby ran around the table and buried her face in Caleb's shoulder, hugging him so hard he almost lost his balance. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered into his coat. "But there is one more thing," Caleb said, gently pulling away. He looked at Mr. Henderson again. The lawyer nodded solemnly and pulled out a small wooden box and a thick book. He placed them on the table among the plates and glasses. "This is regarding my will," Caleb said. The mood at the table shifted. It became serious. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree overhead. "I have updated my last will and testament today," Caleb announced. "Upon my passing, there will be no inheritance of cash for any individual family member. The house will be donated to the foundation to serve as its headquarters. The remaining liquid assets will be distributed to 3 charities that support victims of domestic abuse." He paused, letting the words sink in. "As for my son Jamal," Caleb picked up the thick book. It was a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, who wrote about stoicism, duty, and self-control. "I am leaving him this book," Caleb said. "It contains the wisdom he never bothered to learn. I hope that one day he reads it and understands that a man's wealth is in his character, not his bank account." Then Caleb picked up the wooden box. It was old and scratched. He opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a pair of hair clippers. They were old-fashioned, heavy metal clippers. The cord was frayed. "And I am leaving him these," Caleb said. The table went deadly silent. Everyone knew what they were. These were the clippers Tiffany had used. These were the clippers that had buzzed in the kitchen while she laughed. These were the instrument of their humiliation. "Why, Grandpa?" Ruby asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you give him that?" "Because," Caleb said, closing the box with a sharp snap, "I want him to remember. When I am gone and he is old, I want him to have this object on his shelf. I want him to look at it every day. I want him to remember that there was a moment when he stood by and watched a queen be treated like a prisoner." Caleb's eyes were fierce, now burning with a fire that defied his age. "I want him to remember that silence is a choice. And betrayal is not just about what you do, it is about what you allow to happen. This is not a punishment, Ruby. It is a compass. As long as he has this, he will never lose his way again, because he will always be reminded of where the wrong path leads." He handed the box to the lawyer. "Send it to him," Caleb said. "Tell him it is his inheritance." Caleb sat down. He felt lighter. The burden of the past was finally gone, packaged up in legal documents and wooden boxes. He had turned the pain into a shield for others. He had turned the shame into a lesson. "Now," Caleb said, smiling at Ruby, "who wants cake?" The rest of the night was filled with laughter. They ate the cake, which was delicious. They told stories. They sat under the stars and listened to the wind in the trees. As the guests began to leave, Caleb walked to the edge of the porch. The party was over. The lights were dimming. He leaned against the railing. He looked out into the darkness. He was not looking at the city below. He was looking at something further away, something beyond the horizon. The camera moved closer. It zoomed in slowly, focusing on his weathered face. The lines on his skin told the story of a man who had worked hard, who had loved deeply, and who had been pushed to the edge. Caleb looked directly into the lens. He broke the fourth wall. He was no longer just a character in a story. He was speaking to every son who ignored his parents, every daughter-in-law who chased clout, and every father who felt forgotten. He took a deep breath. His eyes were intense. "You think you know us?" he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You look at old men like me, and you see ghosts. You see wallets to be drained. You see furniture to be moved around. You think because we move slow and speak soft that we are weak." He leaned in closer. "But you forget one thing. We are the ones who built the world you walk on. We are the ones who survived wars and winters you can only imagine. And most importantly, you forget the power of love. He smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was a dangerous, knowing smile. Do not ever underestimate a man who loves his family. Do not mistake his silence for permission, and never ever touch his queen, because a man who has nothing left to lose but his dignity is the most dangerous man on earth. He will not just defeat you, he will burn your entire kingdom to the ground just to see his wife smile one last time. Caleb held the gaze for a second longer, then he winked. He turned around and walked back into the warm yellow light of the house, closing the door softly behind him, leaving the world outside to learn its lesson. In a world obsessed with views and likes, we often forget that dignity is the only currency that truly holds value. My daughter-in-law chased the spotlight believing influence was power, but she failed to realize that true power lies in legacy and respect. By humiliating the woman who gave her husband life, she did not just break a family bond, she signed her own social and financial death warrant. You can strip a queen of her crown or shave her head, but you cannot strip her of her royalty. And a king will always defend his queen, even if he has to burn the kingdom down to do it. If Caleb's final move gave you satisfaction, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. What would you have done if you were in Caleb's shoes? Would you have given Jamal a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved with the Clippers? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. See you in the next story.